Thomas. What's up?
Hello, how is everybody tonight?
Good. How are you?
I'm harmony numbers.
Is that
I've had a
Joe?
big cake.
Hey Joe, how's it going?
Hey, I'm fine.
Oh, my boy, yeah.
Virtual hug, heterosexual hug.
I know.
You remember that?
I'll tell you a funny story about Joe. Well, I met Joe in England and he gave me a CD of Irish traditional music. And I think he was half thinking that I would not really into this, kind of thing. But I was like, Jesus, yeah, I love all this stuff, and it was like, great.
I got it from a charity shop. Oh.
Yeah, it was a good, I still play that all the time, that CD. Thanks very much for that.
Wow. I actually started downloading a little while ago different types of instrumental classics, just different cultures, different instruments from different cultures. And that was really cool. That's brilliant.
Love that.
We're just talking about.
Hey, Robert, nice to meet you. That's the first time I think you're on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've been following you for about 6 years, Thomas, on YouTube, but I didn't think I'd actually be coming here and be invited on and talking to you guys. So yeah, really appreciate it.
Cool. Tina and Greg, they're locals, they're regulars at this point. Before I came on, I was watching the funniest interview. Patrick Stewart from Star Trek. He was also in the movie Dune with the original David Lynch Dune with Sting, and he's talked about the first time he'd met Sting, and he was saying that he said I had not had a chance to listen to the charts. I didn't know what the popular music was at that time that Dune was being made. He goes, I'd lost kind of interest in pop music after the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. I was clueless about what was famous or anything. And he goes, he kept hearing this guy called Sting is coming tomorrow to be in the film. And, he just assumed he was in a band, he was a musician or something. He just heard that. And he saw Kyle MacLachlan giving Sting albums for him to sign them. And he goes, oh, the guy must be pretty big. Yeah. So he started, it was a really big start that time. And he said, I was just such an idiot. I was so clueless. And he said, I went over to Sting. We started talking, we're having lunch together. And he goes, I says, Kyle tells me you're a musician. And he goes, yeah. He says, what do you play? I said, I play bass. And he goes, well, do you play in a band or you're a singer or something? No, he said, I play in the Police. And he goes, playing a police band?
What are you on about, me?
And he says that this day, he has never, ever been more embarrassed in all his life.
That's awesome. That's
great story.
I had such a crush on Sting when I was a teenager.
All the girls didn't they?
Oh, I cried for days and I found out he was married.
He appeared on Lock, Stock, an old classic movie, Lock, Stock. He was actually in that. Yeah,
he's got do you ever see Brimstone and Treacle? That's a very strange film where he plays basically the devil and he takes advantage of his family with a disabled child. It's a very dark film. But he's excellent.
What is it called, Thomas?
Brimstone and Treacle. That song I Burned for You was from it. You know that song I Burned for You?
Yeah.
It's one of his best songs. That's actually from the soundtrack.
I'll have to look that up.
That's how I got into it. The soundtrack album is really good. It has the old Ultravox and old U2 stuff and things like that. And that's how I found out about the movie. And when I saw the movie, it's an amazing film. Really good.
I guess something else that he's very good in. He's got quite a talent as an actor, but a film I must have watched 100 times because I fucking love The Who, Quadrophenia.
Yeah, as Face.
Yeah,
I absolutely love that movie. That's hey Stephen. That's a spiritual film.
Oh yeah, that scene where the kid, I can't remember his name, and he's on his moped and he's down in Dover, when he commits suicide, and Love Reign Over Me is playing, it's just incredible.
One of the greatest scenes in the history of cinema. And he discovers that Sting, who's like the cool mod, is just a bellboy at the Grand Hotel. And there he is with his little bellboy uniform. And when he's not at the weekend, this cool like rocker, this cool mod, it's all fake.
Yeah, don't judge a book by its cover, That's kind of like an inverse of, seeing someone. There's two ways to look at that. In that film, it worked to have Sting kind of the ego sort of laid low in that way when the kid realizes what he does during the day. But equally, you know, you can go to your local corner shop and be served by somebody, but maybe they've got like some great world-changing idea or work of art or scientific invention within them just waiting to come out. You know, just because they're working in a store or whatever, or picking up your trash doesn't, you know, I think there's great potential in all of us. You know, I'm definitely a champion of the human spirit and potential. And I really annoys me this shit about, you know, humans are a cancer on the planet. Well, we can behave like that sometimes, but that's not fundamentally the way it is.
Absolutely.
There's no such thing as Mr. Ordinary. You know, we got hobbies that we can escape in, and you know, that's why I don't identify with my job. You know,
I was just
Always lurking.
I have a friend who has a daughter who has Angelman syndrome, which is a very severe disability. And I was just thinking about how all these parents at the moment who have severely disabled children, whether it be Down syndrome or something like that, are all taking a second place now to these heroic parents who are transitioning their children into different genders, these woke parents. And if that isn't a sign of how sick we've become as a society, I don't know what is. There's probably more social services now being devoted to parents who think, oh, my little daughter's a boy or a girl or a she or a Z or whatever, than there is to like parents who have like kids with Down syndrome or spina bifida or some of these other things. If that's not a symbol of how sick things are, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, totally. Listen, people should be whatever they want to be in terms of their sexuality. You know, just if you're not hurting anyone else, just good luck to you. But it's almost like, if it seems to me, and I'm not a parent myself, but most of my friends of my age do have kids, that if a child or a teenager is going through some kind of crisis, now the lens to look at it, would it help possibly if your little girl became a boy? Do you think that would solve all their problems? And there's this scramble to, like, you know, facilitate that. It doesn't make any sense.
I remember Thomas saying in a video that men that dress up as women have a very charismatic energy.
Yeah, the old-fashioned trannies. Yeah,
the old
big time, yeah.
Oh yeah, you look at like Danny LaRue, and then and even what's his
name? And Lily Savage, incredible.
Yeah, and there's even what's his face, another alternative comedian. I can picture him. He often wears lip gloss. He's got fair hair.
Eddie Izzard.
That's the one. Yeah.
Eddie Izzard, yeah.
There used to the neighborhood I grew up in was very tough, kind of working class, and they used to have one of the biggest things that we used to in the local cabaret scene. There was drag queens. You know, they were considered like really cool. And there was a guy called Mr. Pussy, and he was like the biggest star on the cabaret scene there, and like people who worked in factories or skinheads or like tough guys went to see them and thought he was fantastic because they had talent. Those guys, not only did they dress up, but he was great at singing. He was great at telling jokes. You know, they could put on a show. They weren't just fellas in clothes, in chicks outfits, and the big wigs and everything made them kind of superhuman.
They had balls.
Yeah.
I guess they knew who they are as well. They weren't confused like the whole thing we're seeing now with people. You brought this to my attention, Thomas, when they were, you know, cutting off their genitals and mutilating themselves. It's because they don't know really what they are inside.
It's a spiritual thing. It's totally incomplete. Well, if you look at the early development of like Christianity, you had things like stylites and the flagellants, and these other groups who used to castrate themselves. They thought it was a step towards enlightenment. So it's the same thing, just taken into a secular environment.
Well, how much has this got to do with BPA, plastics, birth control, and the water system? Right.
That's what Clive was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, you do wonder, don't you?
Yeah, and you've got records, obviously prescription of antidepressants in all age groups now. And from what I've read, that definitely suppresses your libido. And in some cases, you cannot perform sexually if you're on certain types of antidepressants. You don't want to, and you can't do it anyway, you know.
And Thomas brought up that gay men you said in a video about it could be in the past life been aborted, right?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It's a kind of a maternal rejection in this life. That was just something I just played around it in my head, but you just don't know, that it could have been like, well, mother betrayed me in the womb, so therefore I can't trust women in this next life. You do wonder, and the wife beaters come from that as well, You do wonder, if there's something to that.
There's also a red pill community.
I'm not judging people who have abortions or anything like that. That's nothing to do with that. It's just saying that the complications of, I hate the karmic or the multi-life complications of these things are something we need to think about. Well,
Joseph, go ahead.
I was going to say, isn't it sometimes homosexuals are men that never grew up with a father or something like that? They never had a masculine role, so they become feminized.
I don't know about that. Like most of the gay guys I'm friends with all have like strong father figures. So I don't know about that one, maybe in some cases. But I'm just going through my head all the gay guys I know, and their dads are all, they have a normal growing up relationship with their dad, that's just from what I know, it could be different with other people.
The author, Joseph Patrick Farrell, in his book Transhumanism, which is, I don't know, quite a few years old now, he's got some, I won't go into the details, you can just get it if you want, but he's got some very interesting and controversial theories about what anything outside of heterosexuality is, where that comes from and why that has happened. It's very, very interesting. But also, as an addendum, sexuality to me seems like a spectrum. I don't think there are that many people, if you take from a man's point of view, being utterly heterosexual on one hand and at the other end utterly gay. I'm not sure how many people are actually at those extremes. I think, whether we care to admit it or not, I think that people are floating a lot more in the in that mid ground somewhere.
Yeah, especially women, especially too.
Yeah, that seems clear.
Women can have that. There's. Yeah, I know you hear women saying I'm ultra straight and all this kind of thing, but it's all they'll also have these relationships that are very loving. They may not be sexual, but they may be at a very deep loving level with another woman that would probably be reserved otherwise for a man.
Those are really
Personally,
powerful.
don't know any women that have never kissed another woman.
That's okay. That's probably pretty common.
Yeah.
Didn't the samurai warriors have lovers? Like I heard this somewhere. It could be nonsense, but if they were teaching a student, they'd often become lovers because it would make them closer together, so that they can. I don't know.
I heard about the Macedonians, Alexander's army, that they were on long campaigns. They were encouraged to have bromances, what they called bromances.
Yeah, I remember you saying it. Yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of them would have been married with families back home. It was like he said, it was a way of stopping them from missing their wives and kids. They could develop a deep relationship with another man in the army.
Yeah, well, you get that
true for the Spartans.
Yes,
At
exactly.
a certain age, they had to marry.
Yeah, it's a completely different culture than how we think today. But it obviously worked, considering Alexander conquered nearly the whole world as it was known at that time.
What's interesting about this too, as you guys were mentioning earlier, it's like with being gay, with people being drag queens and all of that. Not that long ago, that was a counterculture, and it was edgy. And people who were people who were open about it or even hidden about it, they had an edge about them, and they're very confident in themselves. And nowadays, it seems like this thing that's supposed to be like a socially acceptable thing, and it's a very agreeable thing to become non-binary, to become whatever it is. That it's this thing now. It's become so mainstream that edge from it is gone now. There's not necessarily as many Freddie Mercurys around anymore, or people who are openly bisexual or gay that have that kind of edge to them. It's become such a washed out thing that people do for acceptance. It almost seems like an attention grabbing thing. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that's like that is trying to get attention, but it seems to be one of those things. I think, Greg, you were talking about it earlier, where it's like, oh, someone finding a solution for if their kid is going through depression, let's try giving them a sex change or something. It's just become this like this social thing now. It is not so much about people getting to know themselves and finding these things about themselves anymore.
Well, it's like saying, oh, I've got a headache, so maybe if I cut my head off, that'll that'll solve the problem. One of the nonsenses about the non-binary thing is that these individuals create a binary system. There are those who are non-binary, and then the rest of us are non-binary, which is the binary system.
Yeah, it's like destroying humanity, isn't it? It's like in the past, if you're gay or straight, one, you're still a human, and two, you still have a sexuality. But this is about destroying your sexuality, destroying humanity, your own, turning you into like a robot, really, right?
I was talking to a lady here yesterday who got she's doing an online university course here at Maynooth University. And she told me the acceptance letter from the professor had his pronoun preference on it. This is the first time I've ever seen it. And it was like Professor so-and-so, he, him. Yeah. Like that. No, that's how the letter was: name, title, university faculty position, he, him.
We were at Target not long ago and they had proper pronoun coffee mugs.
Yeah. The same thing, sometimes you'll go into Zoom calls like this, and next to your name, it'll give your pronouns too. I saw, because I went to school online primarily for the last few years, and it'd be next to your name, Greg, and then, your pronouns next to it. So it was like that there for a while with the education system now too.
What did you mean by edgy earlier? They used to be edgy. What does that mean?
So I was saying, like if that's a colloquialism we use over here in the U.S. to be on the edge of society, and also have like a bit of grit, or a bit of
it's like dangerous.
Yeah, dangerous. It was like a cool. It was like there was a
punk.
It was punk. It was outside, but it's a confidence thing. It's like having an edge on a blade. Like it wasn't just it's not the socially acceptable, politically correct thing.
Kimberly says alternative.
Yeah, alternative. Yeah. So on the edge of society. So there's the mainstream, and then there's on the fringe, and on the very fringe, the edge of the fringe, you have people who are edgy, but also there's just
the powers that be didn't like that.
Right. Yeah. The powers that be want everybody to be all mixed together in the middle. Yeah. Yeah. No individuality. Yeah.
That's where the Edge from U2 got his nickname. Because in the scene in Dublin at that time, he was perceived as being on the edge. He was like didn't always turn up and didn't always participate fully, and was a bit like aloof. So
so it was one of those things where not that long ago it was considered edgy to be gay. It was something.
Charisma building.
Yeah, there was charisma building, and there was power behind it, and now it's just this thing where it's like you do it to get acceptance from people, and that's a very different thing from being truly, on the fringe. Nowadays it's like the whole political spectrum and everything is switched to, everybody rebelling against everybody doing exactly what CNN and Facebook and the education system tells you to do, and people think that they're being somehow rebellious, but everybody's kind of clumping together in the middle again. So
and a little town, well, mid-sized town, I suppose, depends which part of the world you live in, that I grew up in the 80s. It's about 10,000 people, and there was this gay guy, like openly gay, really camp. He must have lived just on the edge of town, because I never saw him except in the record shop, because he was obviously a big music fan. And I remember with his like skin tight jeans, and he had blonde hair which he grew long, and he wore really colorful tops, and he always had a really big giant yellow plastic comb in his back pocket for some reason. And yeah, he just exuded charisma and power, even though he never spoke. There was just something about him. It was like an energy about the guy, just because of his who he was. And he was the only person like that in the area. But this wasn't someone who was looked on as like a victim, or someone who needed like help from social services or the government or anything. He was just someone who was just living their reality, their spirit, and being what they were, being true to themselves, I think, and that for a lot of people around, and that remains the same today, are not being true to themselves, that hurts. Like, oh, God damn, look at that guy being who he is. I wish I could do that.
No?
Yeah, I've known some parents that have like middle school aged kids, 12, 13, that age group, who are feeling like they have to be accepted into their social circles. They have to conform as some sort of non-binary or something, and if they don't, then they're non-inclusive. It's like these words are getting thrown around and people are not really fucking understanding what that means. And these kids are so young, and it's like, well, it's the same thing as like if you actually are gay and people are forcing you to be straight. It's like, it's the same weird shit.
Yeah.
It's like, and if you are, that's fucking great. Nobody really gives a shit as long as you're not hurting other people. But these kids feel like they have to be this way to have to stay in their friend circle, which is crazy.
And it's like they're not even old enough really yet to be able to make those decisions. If if they are gay or if they're whatever, it's like you're still so young, and it's this over sexualization of children. It's like these are minors we're talking about, and this idea of forcing someone into a sexual identity or being peer pressured in a sexual identity. It's like, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people don't really, if say, for instance, bringing this into the esoteric level, like say someone is planning to incarnate as a woman, and they've been incarnated as a woman for so many incarnations, and then whatever happens to their parents, and say their parents get pregnant and have a female fetus, and then that fetus miscarries, and then the next time the couple gets pregnant, it's a male, and they're born into that male body. So sometimes you have people who they inherently are a female soul or a male soul typically, and might end up in the wrong body and find that out. And that, that takes a little bit of time. That takes until your 20s or 30s to realize, oh shit, this might not be the right thing. And then you've got people who are legitimately a woman in a man's body or a man in a woman's body. But that's something very different than the thing where people get peer pressured, like Timothy was saying, from a middle school where you're barely just starting to go into puberty and just figuring out that your body right thing. And it's just like it's too young to be putting these ideas onto people, just like we were talking about in the symposium recently about people having middle school age plan out their careers for the rest of their life at that age. And it's just forcing kids to grow up too soon and not allow them to be children, and then things just get really messed up from that by the time they're actually a bona fide adult.
Well, we're a few years into this sort of mania for transitioning and what have you, and we're already seeing a lot of coverage in the media of people with buyer's remorse, basically just saying, what have I done to myself? And when I was 14 and I was kind of had this option put in front of me and I was having a miserable time, as quite a lot of teenagers do at certain points. It's a natural part of transitioning from being a child to an adult. And he became a she, and it's destroyed my life.
Like even most boys, nearly every boy when he's about 11 goes through right before when the chemicals start kicking in for puberty, go through a kind of a campy little phase. They're kind of like they go through a little gay phase when they're about 11. It's very common. And I can remember distinctly when that was happening to me, because my hormones were kicking in. And I can remember like my old man looking at me, wondering if we should put a plastic bag over my head or something like that. But after like 6 months, it was gone, but it was like this little kind of, I don't know, it just happens to a lot of little boys. They go through a kind of namby-pamby, flappy arm phase, and then the proper hormones kick in, and then they're boys again.
Or they actually are gay or whatever it is, and then they stay that way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I think with that too, there's also that real problem too within the U.S. in particular. I don't know how it is in y'all's part of the world, but here in the U.S. there's such a weird stigma within heterosexual men of being like afraid of their own sexuality and afraid of having giving their guy friends a hug and stuff, where it's like there becomes this weird unhealthy sexuality amongst straight men who they weren't able to acknowledge the gay phase that they had when they were just getting into their hormones and stuff. And it's just it makes this weird kind of thing happen amongst men here in the United States. I don't know how bad I know, like when I see European men in particular, I see they're all very comfortable locking arms and dancing and singing and stuff, and it's like you trying to get a bunch of American dudes to do that. they'd be like, what's the matter with you, man? Are you gay or something? But it's just like it seems like a lot of European men in particular are a lot more comfortable within their own sexuality than a lot of American men are, where like, you know, you give a guy a hug here sometimes and they think that you're, you know, they think that you're hitting on them or something like that. But I don't know if it's like that so much in the UK. And Tina, I know you've lived in Europe most of your, or you're European and you've lived in Europe your whole life, right? So I don't know if you've discovered that about male sexuality, that European men tend to be a little more comfortable in it.
Maybe in the States it's because of the culture, like the music, rap and things like that. That like, you're gay, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, I noticed that in Belgium, where immigrant groups, especially Moroccans, are very much into that whole rap scene, and they seem less afraid of touching each other than the Belgian men did. And here in Italy, I also have noticed that the men don't seem to have much of an issue hugging each other. They even kiss each other when they see each other.
I know. I was quite surprised. Not a few years back, a Turkish friend gave me a kiss on the cheek, a man, in front of his wife. And it was actually very sweet. It was beautiful, actually. It was like a lovely gesture. But I met both of them, and I gave his wife a kiss, and then went over to him to give him a hug, and he gave me a kiss on the cheek. So it was took me by surprise how average it was, you know. But it was kind of beautiful too as well. It was really sweet and you know, kind, you know. But I don't know, Jason. I never had those problems in America. I always like hug my male friends, and no matter where they are in the world. I can't remember actually getting a funny response from an American guy. Might be an army thing or something where you grew up, or.
Oh no, not in the military. We're very homoerotic in the military. There's gay chickens, these things where you come as close to kissing each other, and whoever backs away loses.
As long as you don't get hard, it's not gay.
Yeah, well, yeah. No, but
well, you've got to be in the military, haven't you? Really, if you're lots of guys isolated together. If you're in the Navy, you know, I mean, you might end up with semen on your poop deck.
Yeah.
You know, that's just
No, but yeah, the military is actually very, very open about being gay and stuff. I knew a lot of gay and bisexual people in the military, but I think actually, Thomas, what you might be saying, you didn't notice it because you're in a different generation, and I would say maybe it's the younger generations with, you know, us millennials and younger, that it might be more of a thing where just men struggle with their sexuality a little bit. That's what I'm coming off. Maybe not from anybody in an older crowd, but yeah, the younger, probably, you know, 30 and younger crowd, 35 and younger.
Well, it goes back to the diet and the medications and the water supply and BPA plastics. I think that's my.
I was going to say, Jason, before I forget, you mentioned the sexualization of children. I was thinking of is it Aldous Huxley or Bertrand Russell? They spoke about getting them when they're young, encouraging sexual activity before puberty, and even homosexuality to stop the pair bonding process.
That was Russell. That was Bertrand Russell.
Russell, yeah.
His uncle.
That was it, yeah, because we're thinking maybe, why are they doing this? Are they just a bunch of perverts? And they probably are. But also there's a method to the madness, because if they're breaking pair bonding, then they're stopping families, and then you can throw in the whole transgender kind of agenda thing into that, where wasn't it Aldous Huxley's Brave New World was reproduction, sex without reproduction, and then reproduction with science, wasn't it? And I just thought I'd say that before I forget it.
No, yeah, that's I do remember that was, and he was also the founder of UNICEF, creepy enough, you know. So that a lot of that goes back to those English public schools, you know, Eton and Harrow, where they all kind of manner of weird things are done to the kids and stuff like that.
Yeah,
yeah, that's totally different thing.
Brutalize the kids in those kind of educational institutions.
Hi, Jade.
Good evening.
You're just arrived first. I want to change subject. Something remarkable happened last night. I had a girl about a dream about a girl I work with on Saturdays called Lana, a Russian girl, very nice girl, and I don't really know her that well. And say hello and small talk, and I had a dream last night of I was having a conversation with her, just talking to her, and this morning, where she should have never been, comes up to me and says hello, and I had the conversation exactly as it was in the dream a few hours before. She was even wearing the same clothes, a blue jumper and a pair of jeans, and it was like I was literally shaking as I was talking to her, because she showed up in this place by surprise, looking to see if she could get work on Sundays, and because I that's how I know of just on Saturdays, and the dream was just a regular dream, chatting to her, and almost verbatim how it happened in the dream the night before took place this morning. Now, how do you explain that? It's unbelievable, you know.
Well, you remember when you guys, when you and Jason had me on the Beyond Room 313 symposium, and I was talking about the greatest insight that I had into the nature of reality, which was that consciousness was fundamental. If you allow that, or if you take that as the case, then time and space, as I mentioned at the time, are no longer fundamental. So all of these weird and bizarre phenomena become possible, just even in theory. So, you know, the past and the future and the present, the running in a timeline the way we think of it, that's not the case. They're all coexisting at the same time. So that doesn't actually explain what happened to you, but it means that it's allowable, if you see what I mean. And in any event, people who just sort of say, oh, well, that's not possible. This is what annoys me about this. It happened to you. So how can anyone say that's not possible in the same way that I've spoken about dreams? Oh, well, you had a nightmare. Don't worry about it. It's not real. Well, it felt pretty fucking real at the time. You know, dreams happen to us. We experience dreams. What the experience you had, Thomas, that was an experience. You can't write it off. Yeah. You know, it happened. So what we're looking for, really, those of us who are interested, is a framework, you know, an explanatory framework to better understand these things.
Yeah, there was also a strange emotional experience too during it. I felt this overwhelming sense of kindness and care and compassion. So, I mean, I don't know the girl, she's married and everything like that. There's nothing funny like that going on. It was just a nice girl I know from the weekend. But it was I don't know, there was almost like a destiny or something that our paths were meant to cross. Maybe we knew each other in a previous life or something like that. But it was it was very kind of soothing and warm and kind feeling. That's the way I would put it.
Like a real connection. Say, Thomas.
Pardon?
Did it not make you pay attention right there in that moment to what was going on?
I was actually shaking. I was actually quite taken back because I saw her talking to the boss in the car park, and I'm saying, "Oh, that's fucked up enough," you know, like here she is. She's never showed up here before, and I was like, just a kind of a happy smile on my face, like there's a synchronistic kind of thing. But when she was standing in front of me and wearing the blue jumper and the blue jeans and talking to me, it was exactly what I saw in the dream. And and along with the feeling of pay attention and feeling very warm and fuzzy, I was actually quite shaking too. I was like, the undeniable reality of what had taken place was awestruck me. That a dream had come into manifestation a few hours later.
I had one of those too, Thomas. The other day, I took a nap in the middle of the day, and I had a dream about a train wreck and seeing the cars laying on their side. And just yesterday afternoon at about 3:30 in the afternoon in Montana, there was a really bad Amtrak derailment where I want to say 5 cars on the train tipped over, and I think five people died or 2 people died and 50 were injured. And I was just telling Timmy about this. I woken up from this nap. I just had this really incredibly vivid dream where I was at a floating over, from an exterior point of view over the train wreck and seeing the cars on their side. And then yesterday on Facebook, I saw somebody posted it, and there was drone footage from that same kind of vantage point of these train cars tipped on their side. And there's just, I think maybe 3 days before that derailment happened, I'm like, oh, there's going to be a train derailment somewhere. And I'm just waiting to see where it happened. And the lighting in my dream was nearly identical to the way the lighting was in these photos. And it was, same time of day, and there's a similar background with where this train derailed as I saw it in my dream. So same kind of thing. But sometimes that stuff just happens where there's just incredible dream synchronicity where this precognitive stuff just creeps in before something happens.
Yeah, well, that just backs up what I was saying. The future can affect the past because time doesn't work the way that we think it does. And if you Google, I can't remember the details, but years ago, I was talking to somebody about premonitions, what have you. The man, Thomas might remember, or indeed one of the rest of you might, the man who painted 9/11.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the details of it, but there was this guy who did this painting, and it was that's 9/11. This was years beforehand.
He did it in front of a clock in front of a bank. Canada, I think it was, or in France. I remember that 14 Times covered it as like an undeniable proof of precognition. He painted he drew the two planes hitting a tower, and he went into a bank nearby where he lived that showed a date clock and a time clock. Hi Nicole. A date clock and a time clock. So it absolutely proved that he had this precognition. It's incredible. Yeah.
Anybody else having cool precognitive dreams?
Yeah, a long time ago. It was rather horrible actually, because I was very small, and it was one of the first dreams that I can actually remember. And I woke up screaming in the morning that there is a guy, and he died on the train track. And yeah, later that day, a guy died on the train track.
Gosh.
And yeah, it was a horrible nightmare, and I don't remember the details of it. I just remember the way I woke up, and I remember screaming, waking up, really crying about it.
I had something very similar. One of the very first precognition dreams I had was watching a TV screen and watching a plane crashing. And then when Lockerbie happened, remembering my jaw hitting the floor, thinking, oh.
Well, Lockerbie is a very spooky story. I can remember people who were there, and they said that there was an overwhelming sense of evil all over that part of Scotland.
Yeah.
There was a British guy who lived as a hermit in an island off the west coast of Ireland. He was an English guy, and he was involved in magic, and he lived on this island where the locals left during the winter months because it was too harsh to seek work in the mainland. And he was on a part of the island where he said himself the fairies lived. And all these sparkling lights started falling out of the sky over the Atlantic that he saw it. And it happened at the exact moment that the Lockerbie plane had blown up over Lockerbie and came down. And he didn't know it at the time, of course. But I saw a documentary about Lockerbie, and it was filled with spookiness and a kind of like the veil being ripped open. So I'm not surprised people like yourself, Jade, had those dreams about Lockerbie.
I don't remember the official story. I do remember the event, but I don't remember the official explanation of that.
Well, they blamed a couple of Libyan guys for putting bombs on the jet. And they wanted to blow it up over Glasgow, which would have been like a nuclear bomb if it had come down on Glasgow. This is the story now. This is the official.
Right.
But it blew up just before or just after Glasgow. I don't know where Lockerbie is exactly, and rained down on the village. But
100 miles south.
Yeah, there's a documentary on Channel 4. If you want nightmares, watch it, about like what people in that village witnessed. You know, and lots of people hit the ground, survived, and they were screaming during the nights they were dying and stuff like that, in total darkness because all the electrical power had been knocked out, and it was just like the village was on fire, half the village was dead, and there were bodies falling out of skies, hanging out of trees and everything, and they were, you know, just then like the next morning, farmers going around their fields and finding whole families strapped in their seats, hugging each other dead in the field in their aircraft seats. You know, things like that. And apparently that community has never been the same ever again. It's been so badly, you know, like a kind of a psychic curse has been put on it. It's a horrific thing. It's like the way it happened.
But trauma does that.
Yeah.
You know, like when you're in an area, like, yeah, like the town I'm from where my parents were in the landslide, that place has a collective trauma from that event.
Yeah.
So many things about planes, not just 9/11 or Lockerbie, but the ones, I can't remember the details exactly, but you know, that plane that was shot down over Ukraine, civilian plane, and that one that disappeared around Malaysia, never to be seen again. And that's not even scratching the surface. Just so many things about planes, about something. And you touched upon this. I'm sure you touched upon this, Thomas, in something recently about the further we get away from the Earth, the more our consciousness is affected, not necessarily in a good way. And it may be that, 40, 50, 60,000 feet above the Earth is enough to create anomalous incidents.
I've almost felt like being in an airplane is like, it's a very liminal space. So you open yourself up to types of events that normally you probably wouldn't be exposed to or wouldn't have an opportunity to happen. So that, that makes sense what you're saying. I never thought about it.
Yeah, you're going somewhere, you've left, but you haven't arrived.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in my own workings, I've used flying as a part of to charge things. Like as you're taking off or landing, there's a huge amount of psychic charge on the plane. People are afraid, or there's all sort of emotional feelings inside themselves. So if you have a sigil or a talisman or something, you can charge it as the plane is taking off or landing. You can even do it during bad turbulence when everyone's thinking they're on the cusp of death. But there was something, I'm not going to say what it is because it's personal, but there was something I wanted and I did it over. I concentrated really hard while flying over Baghdad during a crescent moon. And sure enough, it all came true exactly as I wanted it. Because I was thinking of like capitalizing in on the energy of that part of the world, the so-called cradle of civilization, the war had just ended and stuff like that. And looking down on Baghdad at night in the middle of the desert and that kind of thing. So there's an awful lot of psychic power and energy you can harvest on airplanes.
I flew over Afghanistan when I went to Australia, and the atmosphere was so clear you could see the mountains, and it just looked like Mars. It really just, this is not the Earth I recognize. It was amazing.
Yeah, I had a similar experience coming back from New Zealand, looking down. I'm not really sure what landmass I was looking at. I thought maybe flying over China, but it was impossible to get any sense of scale as to the landscape that I was looking at, but it was quite incredible.
Yeah, one time I saw the northern lights above the ice caps of the North Pole. That was one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. That happened. The pilot just said, if you look at the right side of the plane, you'll see that we're having some display of the northern lights, and everybody around that side of the plane, which is kind of funny to look at the windows. And there was like the whole top of the sphere of the Earth, and the northern lights shimmering along it, and you could see the ice caps, the ice part of like the Arctic Ocean below. And it was just like one of those moments of magic you never forget when you see something like that.
Yeah, I recommend the book Earth Mysteries by Paul Devereux, just in general, for these sorts of things on the edge of our experience, things that are clearly part of how the Earth works, but there's something about them that mesmerizes us. Apart from a light show, there's something about the Northern Lights. There's something about it, and we don't know what it is yet, and that's just one example.
Yeah, we don't know what there's something more to them than just like energized particles hitting the North Pole. There's that, when you see them, there's a kind of a spiritual connection there. It's hard to explain. Like lightning thunderstorms have that effect too. A really big thunderstorm, lightning storm, you'll have those same feelings, especially when you smell the ozone afterwards. Yeah, there's a superhuman aspect to it, or a super awareness aspect to it.
Do you think it's a portal or thinning of the veil, the Northern Lights, like something like that, maybe, where the spirit world's closer or something?
I think it's probably proof that the Earth is a living thing. I think it's like almost like a halo, or something. It's one of those things like when you see plasma and you say, you're not looking at something dead, you're looking at something alive. It's almost like the Earth's personality or something showing.
A rare moment of silence.
I think we're all just absorbing that.
Having a drink to break the nerves.
Here's a little toast to you guys.
Yes.
This is
Cheers, everybody.
first alcoholic drink I've had in about 3 years. Don't worry, I'm not like a recovering alcoholic or anything. I just kind of pretty much gave up drinking in 2015, and I've had one drink since then, and it was to toast a friend's birthday when we were sailing to Tobermory and having a malt whiskey out on the sea and the fresh air on a boat was just the most amazing experience. So this is the next whiskey. So cheers.
Cheers, guys.
So Stephen, you're in Scotland, I'm assuming now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Whereabouts?
So right now I'm in a little place called Kinlochard, which is the nearest place of any note would be Stirling, which is about 30 miles from here. So it's like really quite rural place. On the shores of Lochard.
Yeah, very pretty around there.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Southern part of Scotland. Joe, where are you?
I'm in Hertfordshire, near where Ian hosts his events. Well, the late Ian Crane. I want to say hello to Ian. You know, but yeah, Hertfordshire. So that's a nice little county in England.
Yep, I know Tiana or Tina is, I know Greg is. Jade, you're in County Durham?
No, I'm in Cumbria.
Cumbria, sorry, I always get that mixed up, yeah.
Northwest.
Yeah, the other side, yeah. And the north of England. What, you're near Carlisle, that part of the world?
About an hour from Carlisle, yeah.
And Nicole, you're in Alabama, Sweet Home, Alabama.
Yes, sir.
So we're well represented here.
I think I might be the only one that's in an actual pub. This is
You're in a real pub.
Yeah, well, it's not like a public house as such. It's a sort of private bar.
Cool.
It's on a farm, and it's a working sheep farm. They don't have a lot of cattle, but they do. They have like tourist groups come here. The coaches arrive with American and Canadian tourists quite a lot. They've only just started doing that again since.
What they give the tourists like a shot of a drama whiskey and things like that.
Yeah, and they have the meals here. There's another building across the other side here where I've got my studio upstairs in it, where I teach drums and where.
Yeah, there's places like that around here. They just serve food and drink to tourists really, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah, they make more money from that than they do from the farming, you know.
That's wonderful. I mean, you got to find a way to make it somehow.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found so frustrating about living in the current state of the world is it's really hard to find a job that's actually moral. You know what I mean? It's like even slinging donuts. I personally don't eat that stuff, and I think it's horrible. And I have some conscience. I'm not all like, oh, go out and buy your donuts. Like, I don't want you guys to come where I work, right? Because I love you. But, and I love these people that I'm giving this stuff to. Do you see the dilemma?
Yeah.
It's a little bit, if you're pedantic, which I tend to be, it's challenging.
It's moderation, right? I remember Thomas talking about that in a video.
Well, that's what they say.
Enjoy yourself.
But all this stuff is designed to addict you. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you want to do you know what I mean? Like, if it was like apples, in moderation, totally true, but apples aren't designed to make you addicted and want to eat 50 of them in a row. And
just rot your teeth.
Right.
You're in Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
I used to like their coffee's pretty good as
yeah,
like
they have good coffee.
It goes, you know. So that's moral. Giving people
okay.
coffee. I guess being a stripper is probably the nearest thing to being moral or something.
Right? Exactly. Like, be a temple goddess. I think there's a need. I don't know. And it probably pays better, you know?
Who do we talk to get that job?
I think you have to just like find where to advertise it and not get caught. I think that's really, because black markets are free markets, right, guys?
Yeah. That's the whole thing with the cash thing. I hope they never get rid of the cash thing, because the world would be a much darker place without cash.
Did you hear that shit that Joe Biden just passed? What was it, last week?
Mm-hmm.
He approved the first, what was it?
100% digital currency. Biden approved that right in the middle of, and I know some people will disagree with this, the missing girl thing that's going on right now. I personally think that story is a little bit of a diversion right now, and right in the heat of that, where they were had that on the news, just a little, you know, oh, President Biden approved a 100% digital U.S. currency, and that I don't know if that means that the Federal Reserve currency that's backed by cash will be phased out, but the Biden just made it possible so that we have 100% digital currency in the U.S. And I'm not sure. I didn't see when that's going to go into effect, but I will just imagine, like what they talk about the coin shortage and everything. That we, you know, anywhere you go here, I don't know if Nicole, do you guys have the little posters up at your, or the little signs up at Dunkin' Donuts?
We haven't had any issue with coin shortages
Right,
where
but-
I'm at.
but
Loomis
yeah.
brings all the pennies we need.
Yeah, because here in the Northwest, it's like you'll see, oh, please pay as close as you can to exact cat or exact.
Or use your debit card.
Yeah, but I don't think there's actually a shortage. I just think it's rhetoric to get people to stop using cash.
But you guys too are in an area that is like tightly controlled by the CCP, I think. Like they bought all y'all's politicians, and there might be a few in Alabama that aren't bought by the Chinese Communist Party, right? And so I think that you can really see a big difference in who's in charge when you travel the country.
This is true, yeah. Yeah, Joe Beijing or
Joe Beijing.
Right.
Joe Beijing. I love that, Thomas. That was great.
Yeah, we were cracking up.
Go by Zhang.
Yeah.
China.
You
Well,
were
there's
gonna
always
follow that one, Thomas. That was great.
Sorry, Rob.
there's always been ways around this. You know, cash developed because that with the barter system, whatever, people didn't always have, they couldn't always match up what they wanted to exchange. So let's say I've got a bunch of fish and you've got some wheat. Well, I can offer you my fish, but maybe you don't want fish, or maybe I don't want wheat. So we get these tokens which stand in their stead.
Yep.
So that is incredibly useful, but I think there will be that the gift economy, as they call it, and barter and exchange has already formed part of coping with the
Internet stuff.
the deep-seated problems that industrial society has, and I think that will re-emerge more so again in future. So if they do start clamping down on cash, then they'll be more like, okay, if you cut my hair, I'll mow your lawn, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, the hope is that people will be like that, and they won't all be just like these robots that are like, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. Because there are plenty of people that are like that.
Most will be.
Yeah.
We're going to see a rise in a lot of trades people coming back, people learning trades instead of going for degrees.
Yeah.
That's a workable currency. You can barter with that.
Yeah, local currency.
It never even went away here in Italy. I mean, there's a lot of people that still have their own olive oil presses in their basements, their own wine presses. Lots of time I go bake my neighbor a pie and he brings me a bottle of olive oil instead. And that is normal here.
I love. Oh.
Italy is one of the countries they haven't wrecked, you know. And that's like, I think we said this last week. I remember they used to always, in the European Union, they say, oh, Italy's a mess, it doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. And the thing was, it did work. It worked for Italians. It didn't work for the EU. And that's why.
Same with Greece. Remember, I can't remember the name of the politician there. He was the finance minister or whatever at the time of the currency crisis, you know, the euro thing a few years back. And he's been very outspoken. But yeah, same story. It's just that the difference between the culture of Northern and Southern Europe, for better or worse.
Well, the south of Ireland used to be like that. There was just, everyone was a gangster. And it was just, it just changed when the euro came in, the actual euro currency came in. Well, I remember like growing up in the 70s and 80s, people carried huge amounts of pad cash in their pocket. And it was very kind of like, you know, politicians would say this, you say, oh, yeah, fuck you. And you'd like go off and do your own thing. And like no one really paid, even the government was very corrupt, but it was like, that's why we kind of forgave our corrupt politicians here, because people would say things like, shit, we're all doing it, you know. I always knew in Northern Ireland, that was the whole thing. Well, why should we reunify with the south of Ireland? Because it's like bandit country down there. But I mean, there was an awful lot of freedom in that. And then they kind of, now it's just, now it's like Germany or Holland or something here now. It's or Scandinavia. It's awful, you know.
Oh, that's not myself, but the Northern Ireland Protestant Presbyterian culture, it literally, bandit country. We would literally call it that. You know, we would say, not me personally, but people would say things like the Free State. Yeah, you know, it's saying something like something that sounds inherently good, was like, oh fucking hell, you're not going down to the state, are you? The Free State.
Yeah, and the same in the north. We used to say things like it was so conservative and like nothing opened on Sundays in huge swathes of Northern Ireland. Everything was closed on Sunday. So there was a running joke that you never go parachuting on a Sunday in Northern Ireland because nothing opens there on a Sunday.
Well, I tell you what, do you know what Sundays in Northern Ireland was like?
Well,
And it was very frustrating. Lockdown. That's what it looked like.
I went to a football match up in Belfast, and I was like, I woke up on Sunday morning and I couldn't find anywhere to have breakfast to get coffee or anything. This is like the late 1990s. It wasn't even, the 80s or something, I was just amazed by how there was nothing going on, and I guess that comes from that.
Well, you could have gone to church and got a cup of coffee afterwards at the social.
No, I found myself wandering up to what's that road, into a loyalist area by mistake. I was staying in the Botanic Avenue and I wandered up into.
Well, see, one's Catholic, one's Protestant, either Shankill or the Falls.
Yeah. Oh, well, this one was all like, Irish keep out murals on the walls and stuff like that. What was the name of the place? The Sandy Row.
It was either the Shankill or the Falls.
It was the Sandy Row.
Oh, Sandy Row, yeah.
Yeah, and there was all like Union Jacks everywhere, and I just
fuck the Pope.
Oh yeah, but there was things like Irish. There were murals just to say things like defending Ulster from Irish invasion for since the time of Cuchulainn. They're really funny murals, this kind of thing, and like Irish keep out and stuff. And I have these two guys coming towards me, and I asked them, and I says, "Is there anywhere I can get like coffee around here?" And he says, "Yeah, there's a pub up by Botanic Avenue, but it's a bit of a walk." I said, "Yeah, I'll go up there." And he goes, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Dublin." He says, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "No problems or anything," but I was right in the midst of this like really bad, not a good place for some of my accent to be, but I had no problems. But it was kind of funny too as well. I guess it's your attitude. I obviously wasn't looking for trouble or anything like that, but it was kind of funny. But it was it's still a bit like that. I mean, it's not as bad as it was, but it's still a little bit like that. Enniskillen, is not far from here. I'll still get kind of funny looks and stuff when they hear my accent, but it's not like nasty. It's kind of like. I was with Neil MacDonald. We were in a restaurant somewhere in Antrim, and as soon as I started talking, the whole place goes silent. And it was like not in a bad way or anything. It was just they obviously weren't used to hearing Southern accents, so it was kind of funny,
Have you been to Callanish with Neil MacDonald? Have you done that?
Yeah. What about Neil?
Did you go to the Isle of Lewis? Did you go?
No, I haven't. I've been to England and Ireland with Neil, but not Scotland.
Right. Yeah, Callanish is the this sort of Stonehenge of.
Oh yeah. No, that's always been my dream to go up that way.
Yeah, it's incredible, but the Isle of Lewis. I mean, it's been probably 14 years since I've been there myself, but it also had that free Presbyterian thing where nothing was open on a Sunday. A
lot of Ayrshire in Scotland is like that as well. It's like a little bit of Ulster trapped in Scotland.
Yeah. I've seen that a lot in that part of the country too, yeah.
Interestingly, in Graham Phillips' books, The Wisdom Keepers of Stonehenge, The Wisdom Keepers of Stonehenge, and you'll have a thought on this, I'm sure, Thomas. It appears that in Britain, the megalithic building began right at the north in Scotland and worked its way down, with something like Stonehenge being relatively late.
Yeah, north and west. Like Carramore and Carrowkeel and Sligo are the oldest megaliths in these islands. And then up towards the Scottish ones, they're all about, we don't know how old they are. I mean, one of the reasons I love Neil Oliver, other than he's becoming a real hero now, is when he was on the BBC, he used to drop truth bombs all the time. He'd be a good person for you interview actually, Greg.
He's on my short list actually. Funny you should mention that. Brought to my attention by, as you say, what he's been doing currently.
Yeah, I was thinking you'd be good for interviewing, and then we could bring him on a symposium to ask about megaliths. But he was up at what's that place, the Ring of Rodnar in Orkney, and they had, I don't know if you saw that BBC special. It was very good actually. Yeah, and did you remember when he went? They found a stone circle under the sea, and they said they said the only way this could be there is a minimum of 10,000 years, 10,000 BC. And he kept saying, well, they keep saying 10,000 BC, but that would put it way out of ballpark of conventional archaeology. And he kept mentioning the 10,000 BC. And I realized it because he believed it, but he couldn't say it directly. And then at the end of the show, they did carbon dating. They lifted from one of the stones under the water, which means nothing because all that organic material has thousands of years to float in and out. And so they said, oh, it's 6,000 BC, right and bang, right in the usual megalithic thing, 5,000 BC. But he was dropping truth bombs all through that thing, trying to tell the audience in his own roundabout way, these archaeologists are full of shit, don't listen to them. The Ring of Brodgar, Stone Circle and Complex, the Pyramid of the North, that is way, way older than they're telling you.
There's a couple hours from here, there is a full-size, 100% full-scale replica of Stonehenge, and it lays on the same parallel as the one in England. And so the cool thing about it is I've been there a couple times, and it's a really awesome place to check out. It's right on the river. But it was put up as a monument because there was something about the way that the sun shines here in the 40s or whenever it was that Einstein was finally able to prove his theory of relativity. It had to do with the way that the sun's light refracted, and he was, whatever he did that was mathematical, it clicked for him here. He figured that out while he was here. And so they put that up as a monument to Einstein proving his theory of relativity. And it's just a really cool spot. You go there and you feel the energy of it. It's, even though it's like, it's not an ancient one, it was like built in the 80s or whatever, but just the reason why it's there and the fact that it's on the same parallel as the one in England, it definitely draws in that same energy.
Yeah, that was the whole very suspicious thing recently where they said that Stonehenge had come from somewhere else. It was almost like they were trying to, they said that it was originally built somewhere else and was moved there. And I just found that whole story very iffy and very dodgy, like there was an agenda in it or something,
Yeah, why would they move it?
You can't physically touch it now, Stonehenge, can you? You used to be able to do that.
No,
in the 80s.
Yeah, where do you live, by the way, Robert?
Oh, I live in Kent. Yeah, not very glamorous, but it can.
Well, the Garden of England.
Yeah, I guess so.
I love Folkestone in Kent. I used to go there with my father all the time.
A friend is in Gillingham down there.
Gillingham is close, yeah, Gillingham.
A friend of mine down there got an apprenticeship with the football club there from Ireland years ago, and I went to visit him, and I thought it was a very beautiful part of the world. But he was Gillingham Town FC gave him an apprenticeship when he was like 16 or 17 or something. But I do remember that was a very beautiful part of the country, that part of England. I remember when I was there. But what you were saying then? What were we saying then about Stonehenge? Oh, I'm sorry.
I think I remember though. You can't physically touch the stones now, can you? But I think
they have G4S or whatever they call security guards in the actual stone circle now. Now, 5 years ago, I was making a film, and you can buy access to it. You're allowed to go there before the visitor thing opens. And so there was a film company was making a film. Myself and Maria Wheatley were in it, and it never got made. They ran out of money, but we were in the stone circle. And this was like 6 o'clock in the morning. It was absolutely amazing as the sun was rising over the plains. And there was an American couple. They were like pagans or Wiccans or something, and they were getting married there. You can get married in the circle, but before the tourist office opens. So it was very beautiful and everything. But I was going around rubbing the stones and stuff like that when the security guards were following us, even that early in the morning. They were saying, no, mate, don't touch them, that kind of thing, friendly like, But when the tourists come in, they have to walk along a carpet and look at it from a distance like it's an exhibit in a museum. They can't actually go into the stones. So I'm lucky to be one of the people that's actually been in the stone circle and touched the stones and everything. Now you're not even allowed in the circle anymore. You walk around on a kind of a red carpet, listening to those stupid radio things.
It's a difficult balance to strike, though, isn't it? Because when you could just, like, in the early 80s, Stonehenge Free Festival culminating in Battle of the Bean Fields. I don't know anybody be aware of that, police clamping down and all that. You did have a lot of idiots, chipping pieces off the megaliths to take away and stuff. And it's like, how do you facilitate access to your heritage like that, whilst at the same time protecting it?
No, I totally agree with it. Afterwards, I came away from thinking, yes, I kind of understand why they're doing it. I came away thinking it's more of a shame than something evil. It's a shame it's come to this, like Inishmurray Island here, which is a very ancient island off the coast of Sligo, has it's one of the few places where you can actually point to where the Druid temple is, and then the Christians took over, and it's a mixture of Christian and Druid ruins in a very beautiful place. You can't go to the island anymore because some idiot stole an idol off the pagan altar about 3 years ago and took it back, and it's probably in his mantelpiece somewhere, and then they were there for decades, those things, and no one ever touched them or played with them or messed with them. Some asshole went over in a boat, said, I'll have that, put it on the boat and took it back, and now all access to the island is forbidden. So he ruined it for everybody,
How did we let ourselves, not us, but it's so degenerate overall. And I guess maybe I see it a lot because I'm a drive-through lady. So this morning I served 200 cars, and there's just a lot of people that are unconscious. And has it always been like that? Or is it more that way now because of some over...
I think it's always been like that, Nicole. It's just gotten worse.
Okay. Because there's more of us, more people?
I don't know. I think social media has kind of done something to people. It's damaged them in some way. I think electronics or something.
Well, also the fact that it's creating our own little bubble, right? Like it's feeding me what I want to see. It's feeding you what you want to see. And so at some point, we're not even going to have anything to relate to each other. And unless we continue to do things like this, where we're kind of meshing, because even it seems like you can think about something and you've got ads for it in your Facebook feed.
You're talking about Facebook. You've got Thomas saying that the digital gin.
Yes. That's so accurate.
On
I was going to
Facebook.
say, I remember you, Thomas, saying that you felt you came in contact with what you thought was an AI bot, a possible digital gin, and I think I've come in contact with something like that. It's
several times, but one,
the
first one, the famous one, was the one I often talk about, where you get about 5 years ago, you get all these girlies sending you messages, and you think, okay, it's guys in Nigeria or something like that. Or it's something like that, a scam, a money scam or something. But these ones are different. There was a sensation. They were not just like someone trying to get your sort code to rob your bank or try and offer you marriage. Some of the ones you'd get from Africa could be very funny. You'd have some girl called Blossom Flower who would offer you a hand in marriage and stuff like that. And they were kind of sweet and funny. But this one was different. It was dark. And it was, so I said, instead of deleting them from the friends request, I just deliberately started talking to this one. And I said, hi. And I said, hello. And she goes, where are you at? All right. And I said something like, what do you think? Did you watch the football match today between Real Madrid and Barcelona? Where are you at? Then I'd say something like, what's your favorite song by The Police? Where are you at? I think you're cute.
That would like to.
Right, and then I'm thinking it's a script. Then I'm thinking it's a script. Okay, it's some kind of script that runs to certain words, and I was giving it phrases that it couldn't match up. But then it kind of learned that. I could see it was learning from me. It was so I said, I live in Ireland. Oh, I've never heard of Ireland. Blah blah blah. Is it in Texas?
Yeah. This is the same. Exactly. I was on dating now. I was playing around with these dating apps.
Yeah, it was learning. It wanted me to answer specific, and then I started to realize that the questions it was asking me were trying to find out me, what kind of person I am. And then I could start to feel the energy. You probably felt it, Robert, too, like a violation, like an energy harvesting thing was going on.
There's a Doctor Who episode set in they're on a train in the future. It's Matt Smith, the one, David Tennant, and just like you're saying, learning from you, and when you speak, you say something and it copies you, and then he says it again, it copies again, and then it says it gets smarter.
It was more than just AI. There was a feeling of organic about it. There was a feeling of like you're watering a plant and the plant was growing. It was alive. It was alive. That's the impression I got.
That's so strange because I was playing around with dating apps and I get the same thing. And there's this one, and her image was like a Chinese lady, and she was saying similar things like, "Where are you at?" and things like, "What's your name?" And I told her my name, and then she said, "Send me a picture so that I know you're not fake." So I sent her a picture from my Facebook, and I said, her name was a Chinese name. And it was odd. And then I'll get a friend request on the Facebook by it looks like the same lady, but with a different Chinese name.
And then, Robert, I had the exact same thing happening, but not on a dating app, but on Facebook. A Chinese lady, always the same picture, but always a different name, tried to add me as a friend.
Yeah. And she's tall and quite good looking. But,
quite shapely.
Quite shapely. Then she said her name was Debbie. And so she's got 3 names now. And then she's saying to me, but I saw an image of her playing in water, like by a pool in a bikini, and it looked CGI, and her eyes, there's something about it, looked plasticky. And then she said to me, where are you from? Where you at? And something like that. And I said to her something like Legion for We Are Many. And she said, "Oh, so be it." She didn't get the contradictory kind of way I was talking to her. But yeah, she was learning. But I'm thinking, is she, if there is something there like a digital gene or something, is it trying to form a human identity for itself, likes to see itself as a tall Chinese lady or something? That's what I was thinking, only because of your experience, Thomas, or what you said. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's interesting, the Chinese thing, because do you ever notice like the gray aliens look Chinese as well?
I was going to say, that's what I was thinking.
I often found that very, very peculiar. Like racially, they look like they're, there you go, the cover of Communion by...
I've done that, yeah.
And I used to think, okay, is that some kind of phobia by Americans or being abducted, that they're kind of afraid of Chinese or something? But yeah, and if you look at so much of that stuff, there's a Chinese element to it. It's really strange. It's like, I mean, I don't mean that in a racial way or anything. I mean in a peculiar concept that ever since the gray alien showed up, the features of these things, and I've even noticed that contemporary images of fairies and things like that have Chinese features. They look more and more like Chinese than Europeans when they see them illustrations.
Yeah.
I remember I was talking to Christian Morris probably at the beginning of the lockdown about something interesting, similar to this, that you know how in a lot of the Asian countries, when people are sick, they'll wear the face mask over their face. And I was talking to the extent of it's so interesting how, like, through the pandemic and the lockdown and all that stuff, how Americans in the Western world and everyone have started using these masks the same way that they are in these places that they manufacture our electronics in. So if you go and look at the photos of people making iPhones and Samsungs and Androids and all that stuff, people are all covered up. They've got their face covered up and they've got like all this stuff on, and they're all sitting in these assembly lines, hunched over and soldering these phones together. And it's almost like the world that the phone was born in is becoming being created in. That world is being mocked up outside the phone through the phone, because if it wasn't for all of these iPhones and Androids and stuff, people wouldn't be paying attention to the media and, listening to all these lockdown mandates and everything. But it's like from that realm that these electronics were born out of, it's replicating its own creation outside of it everywhere now. And
the demons have gone in through their side, China.
Right, yeah, and everything
their technology, and it goes through to us from their side.
Yeah, right. Because I've said from the start of this that if I've done a video called Where Exactly is the Pandemic? And in that I say, basing just on the evidence of my own five senses, there is not one. There is no pandemic. I cannot see any evidence for it. The evidence, such that it is, comes from media and devices. It's external and artificial.
It's all hearsay.
Yeah, exactly. So
what was cousin's uncle's brother?
What's happening now would not have been possible. It would not have been the same. For example, I was talking earlier about growing up in the 1980s. Technology then, if you wanted to make a phone call, if you didn't have a phone in your house, you had to go to a phone booth, and put some coins in. Where would the pandemic have entered our consciousness in the 1980s or earlier without the media? We had TV, you had radio, that would have been there, but it was still not uncommon for someone not to have a television back then. So where would the 24/7, given that television stopped at midnight, where would this pandemic have happened? Where would it have happened?
Do you think the War of the World thing was a test way back in the 30s on the radio? A test of how effective media itself was way back when there was just radio.
I think I remember Alan Watts.
Panic.
I think I remember Alan Watts saying that. They played it on the radio and you had people running for the hills.
Yeah.
Even though they did say,
Oh yeah, and Orson Welles is pulled before a government committee and everything on that, and say because they were even quite shocked by the behavior of people in New Jersey. They were doing things like shooting water towers, thinking that they were the Martian spaceships. If you listen to that War of the World originally broadcast, though, I don't blame people back then for thinking it was real, because it was done in the form of a news report. It was very plausible and realistic. And all that people had back then was the radio and books. So they had active imagination. But that caused not just in New Jersey, because that's where the story basically takes place, but all over out the eastern United States. It unleashed unbelievable panic, that people were running off into the hills with their kids, terrified that they thought it was real. And it just goes to show you that it's funny, like back then, the US government were disturbed by what had happened. Now any government would be delighted. They would say, oh, now we can use this on the people.
Were they really disturbed, or were they like interest peaked? Like, ooh, this would be a great way to manipulate people.
Well, do you think it could be a tester for Project Bluebeam or something like that? Maybe they thought, well, they reacted that one.
Empire has such a long game. It doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility that they started grooming us for this back when it was our grandparents.
Well, H.G. Wells wrote War of the Worlds, and he was like one of the founders of he was a big shot in the Fabian Society. He was one of the founders of the British Labour Party, and he was a big time player in the world we live in today. And the whole thing of what's Joe got there? The H.G. Wells bio?
It's H.G. Wells, the Time Machine, and the other works.
Yeah, so he was he was one of these futurologists, but in a very dark way. He was vehemently anti-Catholic. He hated working class people. He didn't even like Protestant people, poor Protestant people. He was a total snob. He was a total classist snob. And he was one of these. He had this thing that people, anyone who didn't have a college degree should be sterilized or killed, and they called them the base. And instead of killing them, with George Bernard Shaw's humane gas, that's all true. If you watch that video, George Bernard Shaw asking for people to be killed with a humane gas because they can't justify their lives. He was the same. Yep.
Scientism, right?
Yeah, before it was called that, but it was just snobbery, really. And they were all like upset that Hitler had killed the wrong people. They said that Hitler, he couldn't kill enough. That George Bernard Shaw was saying it wasn't that Hitler killed the wrong people; it's that he didn't go further. He should have killed all the working class as well.
Well, so who's gonna mow your lawn, dude? What are they thinking? Like, they don't want to do it.
Well, it was robots. It was like as soon as
okay.
as soon as machines could take over a job, you, madam, you would go in front of a committee and justify your existence. Why should society exist? For the purpose of keeping you alive, as George Bernard Shaw said. And the whole thing was that the people that wouldn't be allowed to raise their children, they'd be raised by the state. That sex was just purely for reproduction. Everyone would wear uniforms, and they would have a special navy to kill people who tried to escape to islands off the coast.
Nice.
To live. I mean, this is the kind of guy that Orson Welles was. It was a complete nasty piece of work. So I think what Robert said, yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think he wrote that book in mind for future technology to actually take it to the next level.
And Robert, what you said too about Bluebeam, it's like they don't even need to necessarily project things in the sky to make Bluebeam work now. We just have to send out enough information on Facebook or on CNN or something to convince people of something. Like if they wanted to say that there was an alien invasion occurring, they just have to push out like a news story on Facebook and people would believe it. Even though, like I think Greg, like what you're saying, you know, the actual 5 cents reality of going around and looking for the pandemic anywhere, if there were any kind of disaster that the media put out and just said that there was one, people wouldn't even need those 5 senses to see a projection of a hologram, right? Just, oh, okay, there's an alien invasion. Oh, okay, there's a whatever, because it's just like with the pandemic, the Rona, the needlecraft and all that, it's all just pushed out to these devices. And people
you got me thinking, I think it was on the news. I remember watching it, an American news channel. They said, oh, somebody thought they saw a grey alien in their garden. They had it on footage and he was climbing over the fence or something. It looks so CGI. But that idea, they put that out there. That's just like a little tester. What you're saying, Jason, yeah.
They don't even need to have any proof or anything that your own, because I think that the whole establishment media since, you know, the early 20th century is designed for people to not trust their own senses or to not use their own senses, to not go out and discover things for themselves, for yourself, but to just have the media tell you what to see, what to believe, what to feel. You know, we don't live in a society anymore where people can go out and use their own senses to create
collectively gaslit for 30 years at least.
Yeah,
I was watching the
like we're all Stockholmed.
Yeah,
we got the adverts on the football the other night. Champions League, I don't know, but they were wearing virtual headsets, parties. They were having parties in virtual headsets. They were promoting that.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah. Yeah,
one of the main things about the lockdown and the pandemic in terms of evidence was that you could not move around. You certainly couldn't go to a hospital unless you were taken there in an ambulance. So you could not go to the next town. So it was very difficult to, in a 5 sense, verify any of this because you were confined to this, very narrow zone. So you did not see, or you could not hear, you could not touch, taste, feel anything that said there was a pandemic. But the way you would normally verify that was to go and look for it, and you could not do that.
There's people who literally stayed indoor for the most part since
they're training
March
us
2020.
little communists.
What's that?
They're training us how to be good little Chinese Communist Party members, just like do what you're told, obey what they say, what we tell you is the truth, and don't deviate.
Where does that come from? That Chinese, we got to be like Chinese. Is it money?
I don't know.
Chinese
robotish. I don't want to be an individual.
Maoism. Chairman Mao in his Little Red Book, and the Chinese, particularly the Chinese Cultural Revolution of the 1960s, where they weaponized the young Chinese to tell them that all the problems of China, and there was a lot of famines at the time, were caused by the older bourgeois communists and farmers who were keeping food for themselves. So they turned huge numbers of young Chinese into the Greta Thunberg types, but gave them machine guns. And they went down, killed everybody that they thought was you know, like literally, it was like, think of Greta Thunberg with a machine gun, thousands of them, right? And they would go into villages and they would shoot half the people. There's this village was accused of not meeting agricultural, you know, targets for the year. They would take everyone in the village to the field and they would shoot half of them dead in front of the others. And the idea was to leave a bullet of fear in the brains of the others. So that left that transformed into the China we know today, because then they started to embrace the Gang of Four. That was the kind of the takeover after Mao died, and then you had the movement after Tiananmen Square towards capitalism. And the West watched this. The West sorry, just said Joe. The plutocrats and the globalists in the West watched China enviously and said, we need to get a piece of that action. And that's where the SJWs and the Greta Thunbergs and all the others come from today. It's the Chinese Cultural Revolution exported here.
You said the mafia. So you've got gangs in China as well, I suppose. But are they with the government?
I don't know much about it. I think the government is the biggest gangster of all there, though, aren't they? They're like the biggest gangster. I think maybe in places like Hong Kong, you'd still probably have leftover gangs from the old days.
Triads,
yeah. And you know, but I don't know how it would be in mainland China. I am not, you know, the whole thing is so completely controlled. But I mean, I guess when there's a will, there's a way. They'll always become gangsters somehow. But yeah, that's what they saw. They looked at, just like the like of Henry Kissinger and all the others looked at China and went, wow, we could have a piece. I wish we had that here.
So I work in like tourism in one of the biggest tourist attractions in England. And we get tons of, prior to the pandemic, we had tons of Chinese tourists from China because, you know, their economy, however artificially, was booming, and lots of people who couldn't have previously afford to travel overseas could do so. But still today, there are God knows how many thousands of Chinese students studying in the UK. And, you know, in the pandemic period, people have been having their holidays at home. So they've been coming to see us. I know every day we're greeting sometimes hundreds of young Chinese people, students, and they're all very nice. You never get any attitude from any of them, but they are so meek and compliant. It is untrue. It's like literally, if I say, if you could just stand over here on the right-hand side for me for a few minutes. Oh yes. Oh my God, yes. You know, it's unbelievable. They're so apologetic before, and they've got nothing to apologize for. They're so ready to comply with anything, no matter what I say. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I saw a thing. That's one of the reasons their soccer teams are not that good. With their numbers and everything, they should have some of the biggest soccer clubs in the world, and the national team should be winning the World Cup every 4 years. But apparently, there's this kind of like they're afraid of the referee. You know, it's this weird thing. You know, they're afraid of the match officials that they'll do something wrong. And there was some Irish coach went out there to coach a professional team, and he said the culture was just impossible to get around. Like telling people, like, you know, well, if you can get away with a professional foul, do it. Or if you can, you know, be offside and score the goal, celebrate it. Don't, you know, try to fool the linesman if you can, which is like part of, you know, European soccer. And no, he couldn't get them to think anything other than what the match officials say is always correct, and that's the end of it.
David Slaney brought up a good point in the chat about the social credit system, where I think that we're starting to see little bits of that creep into our current culture with the needlecraft passport and all that, where it's people are going along with getting it because it's a social thing. And if you go on to Reddit, if you go in the way that they do things on Reddit with the karma points and everything, where you can't post or respond unless you have a certain amount of karma points. And the same kind of thing, I think, is starting to creep onto Facebook and Instagram a little bit as well with the algorithms. And especially like within our group, they've done this thing where we get notifications all the time that, oh, your group has violated whatever standards and your visibility has been reduced. So that way that it's like when we post things in Beyond Room 313, it's not going to show up in real time or as well on people's news feeds because we've had whatever, you know, community violations or something. So it's like there's already this kind of soft social credit system being put in place in the West. And I think that's just kind of scary that we're getting closer and closer to that, where it's not necessarily at the point yet where it's controlling what we can get for, you know, being able to use our money and being able to go to the grocery store or anything yet. But I think they definitely have things like that in place in the Far East already about what you can do, what places you can shop at because of your social credit score.
Is it tied to 5G?
I have no idea. I think 5G is a network, right? The way 5G works is they're trying to do the Internet of Things where your internet router talks to your smart light bulbs, your smartphone, your smart microwave, your smart coffee maker. And I'm pretty sure it's just a near field communication thing is what 5th generation internet is. But yeah, it's a different internet bandwidth than 3G or 4G. So I'm pretty sure it's just a different carrier wave is it what 5G is. But,
Jason, I saw something the other day. Somebody posted in one of the many groups that I'm in the Messenger that they are possibly bringing in programmable currency that you can only spend on certain things that are classed as essential.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what Biden's digital currency, I think, is about. Like what Timothy brought up earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, you could have a fixed wage, couldn't you? Like at the end of it, and then they wipe it clean, so you can spend it within the month, and then if it's digital,
only on certain things, though.
They're ridiculous.
You want to spend money on your hobbies or something? Oh no, you don't need that. But
no, you don't need hobbies.
Yeah, we checked your shampoo. You need more shampoo.
Yeah, demolition man, no meat, no smoking, you know.
Yeah, you read my mind, Robert. I was going to talk about negative interest rates in economics, but also this idea of your credit expiring, as you say, at the end of the month. This negative interest rates, if that occurs, saving will be absolutely pointless because you'll be losing money. So therefore, the solution to that is you get your, whatever it is, government handout, your universal basic income at the start of the month. And if you haven't spent it all by the end of the month, it goes. And this encourages you to spend. This is a way of artificially stimulating the economy, or at least keeping the economy going. But if they can then also control what you spend it on, then that means they dictate what industries or sectors are supported or allowed or not supported.
The NPCs will go along with that, but people like us, they will just keep jobs and keep going.
Bucket and go start our own grid.
Do you know bye music? Bye art. Bye concerts.
I think Jade, with that, the really good thing is there's going to be such a pushback against that. We're just going fuck them, and we'll have our own cultures then, where we'll have shows that we're not we don't need needlecraft passports and stuff to go to shows. In people's basements there'll be abandoned factories because there's going to be all kinds of big spaces. So there's going to be an underground scene again with the art, big easy shows, and so the underground is coming back because I don't think we.
Yay!
Here we are right now in the underground.
The NPCs will be depopulated probably.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But,
I kind of wanted to point out something that I noticed with, on Facebook, where they've been like trying to counteract the go get your vaccine with the why don't they require you to eat well and exercise. And to me, that is like the exact wrong thing to be sharing, because that's what's coming. They're trying to condition us to want to force good health or whatever on people. And I don't care how good it is for you. Forcing it on someone is never right? So it's kind of like how I feel about this argument that they make about, if I have to be drug tested to get a job, you should have to be drug tested for welfare. That's exactly the opposite direction. No one should have to be drug tested. Not everyone, no one, right? But this is kind of how they use the social engineering to move their agenda forward slowly. Because if you're not really thinking clearly about it, of course, it makes perfect sense that they should have to get their drug test, since I did for my job, right?
Oh, you're just paranoid, I'd say.
You have, Nicola, you have to get a drug test to work in Dunkin' Donuts?
Oh, no, I don't. No.
Oh, okay.
Well, they couldn't hire anybody if they drug tested.
I had to, all the Wall Street banks I worked in, I had to do drug tests for all of them.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that there are so I've always been just an artist, a self-employed artist until this job. In fact, when they offered me the job, I was quite surprised because I thought for sure I was unemployable. So I'm very pleased, you know. It's like,
the employment agents used to give me tips on like how to beat the drug test.
oh, cool.
You know, stop on a Friday, go and I'd be like, oh, no, I don't take cocaine or anything. You don't? No.
Yeah.
There was so many cokeheads in that industry. It was a given that that's what you wear.
Yeah.
I remember like one girl there, and she was like, "Oh," she goes, "So Thomas, what we'll do is we'll go out to dinner. You know, we'll land this job. We'll land this job at this place. We'll go out to dinner, and I'll show you how to do it. And with them, you know, all during the weekend, just eat loads of bread and drink loads of water, and you know, take laxatives and stuff. Be out of your system by Monday morning." And I was like, "I know, I don't touch anything like that."
Why would I do that? Like, it takes so much work to counteract, and it.
But
Why
the drug deals was stupid. The drug test was stupid because everyone who was a cokehead was doing these tricks to clean themselves up before the test on the Monday or the Tuesday morning. So it was bullshit. It was just to cover their own ass.
Yes.
Guys, I'm going to I'm going to love you and leave you because I've just got a couple of things I need to do before I hit the hay before tomorrow. But as same as last time, this has just left me feeling really good.
Excellent. And grab Neil Oliver if you can.
I will.
Make that a priority. I think you two would have a great conversation.
Yeah, but he speaks really well. Well, obviously he's a TV pro, but when he's been speaking about the pandemic, he's very eloquent and very moving.
Yeah.
So I will get hold of him. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of the evening, guys, and hopefully,
Bye, Greg.
Virtual Pub 3. I'll see you there.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Greg.
Bye.
Thanks. Good night. Thank you.
Nicole, you brought up a good point about social engineering, and that's just one of those topics that not a lot of people understand that it exists. And that's why, you know, it's so easy for the wool to be pulled over people's eyes, because they don't get that, they don't understand that that most of what you get pushed at you through social media, through mainstream media, is there to manipulate you into thinking something which you believe is your own thought. So like the basics behind social engineering being exactly that, you know, you convince somebody of an idea that they think that they were the one who came up with that idea because it's so sympathetic with the way that they think. But it's one of those topics that I think Thomas does an incredible job at showing what social engineering is. And there's, you know, being able to talk about it and expose it on that like kind of nuts and bolts level to get you thinking about things in a way so you can kind of see through the bullshit. And that's just, yeah.
Similar to how on those charts where they're showing the hospitalizations of vaccinated versus unvaccinated,
Needle crack.
on the charts themselves, they say not fully vaccinated. They don't say unvaccinated. So what they're doing this trick where if you haven't had 2 shots before you get into the hospital, 2 weeks, it has to have been 2 weeks since you had your 2nd shot before you are diagnosed with COVID, they count you as unvaccinated.
We got to use the needle crap so this video doesn't get taken down.
Getting the illness from a shot, but they're not fully vaccinated. So they're not actually lying because in the language, but the way most people read it is like they're unvaccinated. They haven't had a shot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you got to use needle craft so this video doesn't get taken down when we upload it.
Yeah.
Okay. Needle craft. Yeah, we got to use the lingo so that we don't get this taken down.
Yes.
Speaking of needlecraft, did you do that? Did you make that beautiful dress behind you, Nicole?
Yeah, this is a cape I made. Yes, sir.
Oh, show me.
All right.
We all love to see this.
So this is my cape that I call quote like a rock star. The machine that I use to quote with is on wheels this way on 2 axes, you know, so I can draw with it like a big pencil.
Yeah.
And all the work that I do is just freehand drawn.
Wow.
And then I painted this afterwards. So
it's like fabric paint.
Yeah, I used fabric paint.
Okay.
And then I also, you know, bedazzled it.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I made that in
You've got a spiral.
2007.
You've got a spiral on it. What's your why did you put the spiral on it? What was your
I don't know. I'm just good at those.
I was going to bring that
Like-
up, the spiral, on this episode. I was going to mention it.
yeah?
I see it there, and I'm like, oh god, coincidence.
Well, and
again.
that particular feather is really cool because if you pulled it out from the center to the end, there's only feathers on one side, but it looks full because it spirals all the way in,
yeah.
almost like a
Sure.
conch shell. Yeah. I have no idea why I'm so talented at that particular thing. It's really a weird thing, but it's my gift. And so that's what I'm here to share.
You have an
Lovely.
Etsy shop, Nicole.
Well, yes, I do. I'm so fortunate. I'm really, really blessed. Good
That's
tools make all the difference, you know?
Needlecraft.
And you know how they talk about the overnight success that took 35 years? Well, I'm finally to the point where I'm actually charging what I should be charging. It takes a long time to get to that sweet spot where you understand how much work it is actually going to take you. And you don't, at least for me, cut myself off short. Like I used to for many, many years, underquote a price and then stand by my quote. So I'd be like overworking, over delivering for what I'm finally to a point where it's like, yeah, I feel like that's totally fair. I'm delivering a
Good.
product that's worth the price I'm getting and I don't feel cheated. And it's always myself that was cheating myself, right? Because I just wasn't putting enough value.
Self-employed artists would really
all the
struggle with
things in or
I
mean, that's
struggled
one
with
of the
that too for
challenges
a long time in my job. I definitely would go way above and beyond and not charge enough. So I'm a huge cheerleader for people charging their worth, especially for creative things like that.
I think that it's really common for women to undervalue what we do too. Like since I teach a lot of women, I've noticed that they don't value their contribution or what they create nearly as much as a man would. A man would look at that and go, oh yeah, absolutely, that's worth $2,000.
Testosterone,
Right?
isn't it?
But a woman would be like, oh, I could make that. Well, maybe you could. I was teaching at a big conference and I was wearing this up to my room in the elevator and this lady, you know, they're not all nice, looked at me and she's like, well, you're really proud of yourself, aren't you? And I said, lady, if you could quilt like me, you'd wear it too.
I love that. I love that for you. That's awesome.
That is true though, because I noticed that the galleries and the markets I work at, the male painters charge way more for their paintings than the females. That's definitely true.
Can't even get mine in the galleries around here. Never mind put a price on them.
Well, maybe you could like put your pen name as a man's name. Change your name to Frank. You know.
Wear high heels.
I like the way you think.
I remember I joined a nightclub years back, and the artists were amazing, and a lot of them. That's right. It was £5 for 2 hours, and there was sometimes about 20 people in a group, but you would get obviously not one-on-one attention, but they'll come round and help you and everything like that. And a lot of them were artists. These were women mainly, and a lot of their art was on the wall, and it was like 30, 40, 50 £50, and the paintings were gorgeous. And then I'd go into like a coffee bar or somewhere else, and then there would be like something like $2,000, and it's just, you know, absolute crap. But the artists, these ladies could just churn these paintings out. It was lovely.
Yeah,
Yes.
I see that all the time.
Rich people use paintings to move money, don't they? You said, Thomas.
Yeah. Isn't it a great way to like launder money?
And also the fashion industry too. The high-end fashion industry. You know, when you see these fashion shows, and they show like a guy walking, he's wearing a giant tampon and a skirt or something like that. They're like, well, no one's going to buy that. They're actually wasting. It's a big money laundering thing. And the same with the painting. Say I'm in the Russian mafia and I have to liquidate $100 million, right? That I can't get rid of before the taxman or anyone else finds it. So I go to Joe and I say, Joe, you're a painter. And you go, what? And I says, you're a fucking painter. Now here's some acrylics and a canvas, brushes. Now just paint something. Well, I can't paint. I don't give a shit. Just paint anything. And then you give me back 5 or 6 canvases that are just splashes of paint on things. And then I go over to Stephen and I say, Stephen, you're an art gallery owner. And you go, what? And they go, you are now. And I'll go rent a business into town and I'll give you paintings to put on the wall. You'll be showing Joe's paintings. And then I'll go to Robert and say, Robert, you're the critic who writes for the Guardian art review on Sunday. There's this guy called Joe that you're to go and say is the most amazing new discovery of British art. And he's in a gallery run by a guy called Stephen in Scotland. And then the next thing you know, Joe's a big famous artist. His paintings are going for 40 million. And then I go to Jade and I say, Jade, here's 40 million, buy Joe's paintings. And that way I give $1 million to Joe, $1 million to Stephen, $1 million to Robert, $1 million to Jade, and I keep the other 95 million for myself. And that's exactly how it works.
Yep.
And the money's then clean.
So when are we getting this 20 million?
I'm ready.
All right.
Start laundering it at like $585 at a time, guys.
That's how
They passed that.
It's gangsters laundering money. That's all that stuff is.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot more businesses that are that or fronts for other things than we really want to admit. Because if you actually like stroll around and consider the cost of the real estate that they're in and really look at what the business that they say they're in is doing, it's like, really, how is that possible?
Well, be very careful of restaurants that have huge menus, but when you go in, half of it is never there, but they still have a very large place. Well, that is because that half of the place is actually used for drugs. It's just a storage room.
Yeah.
It's a front.
Yep.
I often wondered about that. That makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. And then you have like the other aspect too, where I would, if I had this money, I say I get people who are friends of rock stars or film stars and tell them to show up at the gallery opening night and have their photograph taken with Joe, you know, to make it look like he's the famous, all think he's amazing and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's despicable how it works, but that's how it works.
It doesn't take much to get yourself into those circles either, if you really want to.
And sometimes you roll into it by accident even.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just need to be that employee that it happens to be next upon the hierarchical line, and one gets fired, and
there you are.
Surprise, you're a drug pusher.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I often wondered about those fly-by-night restaurants that, you know, show up in cities all over the world, like, you know, that they're really fashionable for about 6 months, then they go out of business. I think, yeah, that's all. Oh, we lost X amount of money. No, you did. They pocketed it. Yeah. And a lot of those places would be involved in other things too, like buying paintings to hang on the walls from Joe. It's amazing how it all works, how it's all tied together, you know, and give free meals to Hollywood stars to have their picture taken eating in the restaurant. You know, it's amazing how they have it stitched up so beautifully.
Yeah, I worked for a guy who always gave half of the meal, half of the drinks for free on every table. And you wonder how that guy doesn't go out of business. I know how he doesn't go out of business.
Yeah, right.
Because he wasn't in business.
No, not this business.
Right. And that's a loss leader for his actual business. Kind of like donuts are a loss leader for Dunkin'. Like, we make our money on coffee.
Yeah. I mean, it's like these restaurants there. You do see those places where there's someone, oh, it's your wife's birthday, and they give her 5 bottles of champagne, and they give, you know, things for free and bake a cake. That's all this, and they think, oh, he's a great guy, but it's not. He's all flushing the money out.
Yes.
Imagine the same thing is done on a much bigger scale with wars and countries being invaded, where something like this is not necessarily money that's being laundered, but we're talking about the energy of human lives being taken. I know, Thomas, you've talked about this before in depth quite a bit with like World War I era, where these big mass slaughters are just a way to build a gigantic energetic charge and they'll use some kind of thing to justify a war, but all this killing will just end up going into charging some kind of gigantic ritual that we have no idea exists.
There was
But
also
also, we talked about that, Robert, that there is a lot of money in the weapon industry. And it is one of the major economies on earth. Belgium, for instance, if
Yes,
the
I was
weapon
going to
industry
say
in
that.
Belgium,
the only weapons dealer I ever met was a Belgian guy.
yeah,
And you could go. He lived in. I didn't. He was a friend of mine, and I just knew to say hello. And he was a very nice man and everything. A young guy too, and he was a weapons dealer. And in his apartment in New York, you could go over there, and there was all catalogs of guns and machine guns and everything in his apartment. And you could sit there saying, "I want 17 of those rocket launchers, 25 of those things," and he would arrange to sell them through Belgium to them. It was just unbelievable. It's funny you mentioned that. The only arms dealer I ever knew was a Belgian guy.
yeah, we manufacture them in Belgium. If
Yeah.
the weapons industry in Belgium would go down, it would be catastrophic for the Belgian economy.
Is that where Prague is?
I don't know.
Belgium's Prague. Is Prague in Belgium?
No,
Oh,
that's
no. No.
What's that?
Prague
I
is in
just wondering where
Czechoslovakia.
Prague was. I'm just random.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, that was surprising. The minute you said the arms industry, I knew you were going to say Belgium, because I knew that was a big thing there in the hotels. I knew a girl who worked in the Hilton Hotel in Brussels, and she said half the rooms were used to do weapons dealings and stuff like that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
good hotels too, big hotels,
And
fancy hotels.
the people involved in them were very respectable people. They were not like scuzzy gangsters. They'd be like, this is just a business. They bring their kids along with them. So this is my daughter. She just hangs around. Okay, how many machine guns do you want?
Just 3. Each arm and a spare. Right? I don't need to arm the neighbor myself.
Now we got the Taliban's all armed with everything now, so that all came through there. I'm sure it all went through some of these big arms dealers.
It's like just being in the right time in the right place, right?
That was a
Yeah, I was going to say, thanks to Biden, yeah.
that was a scene, that movie Bedazzled, where Peter Cook plays the devil, and he's all these alter egos in the world, and one of them is an arms dealer, this like rich gentleman's club in London, and they're playing snooker or billiards or something, and he goes, how's business? He goes, dreadful. These bloody peace agreements they keep having in Africa. I'm making no money this year. Like.
Damn them.
Funny.
Oh, really?
Just reminded me there of like a bizarre night that I had when I lived in London back in, I think it was probably about 2006, something like that. And friends of mine had put together a band, and the guy ended up playing bass for them, who was actually my landlord for the studio that my band rented. And he was a dodgy character in many ways, but he was a good bass player. But his business partner was the bass player from Skunk Anansie. You know that band?
The bass player is a black girl.
No, she's the lead singer.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of someone else.
I think she plays guitar, maybe. But,
okay, I'm getting mistaken. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so the bass player was like partner. They bought this building, which was part of a well-known studio in Hackney at the time. But our room was in the kind of really shitty end of the building, and they sold that off to these two guys, to the bass player from Skunk Anansie and this other guy, who also happened to be a bass player. And so he was playing bass for a friend's band, and I went along to see the band, and they played, and it was all, cool gig, and then everybody sort of disappeared apart from this guy, and then this guy Alan, and he sort of looked a bit like Uncle Fester from from the Addams Family, but eventually I started drinking with him, after the gig, after everyone else had gone home, and then he was one of these guys who just kind of, he didn't want to say die at the end of the night. He wanted to keep on drinking, and he was like, I know this club. I think you can get us in there. And it was like a really exclusive kind of,
Speakeasy.
yeah, sort of thing. And it was in Soho, and you had to be a member to get into the thing, and which neither of us were. But so the bass that he was playing that night belonged to the bass player from Skunk Anansie, and he on the strength of having this bass belonging to this guy, he talked his way into this speakeasy, and we got inside, and it was like just like a little taste of a world that I've never experienced in my life. There were sort of these sort of German kind of merchant bankers and all these people in the place, and this guy Alan, he just kind of talked his way in, and like he brought the bass out, and he was showing the guy at the door, the security guy, and then the next thing we were let in, and yeah, it was just so it just reminded me of like a completely bizarre sort of night out, and
A different world, yeah.
yeah, where there was like whiskies behind the bar that I'd never heard of. They were so kind of exclusive, and yeah, he started spinning this story to these German guys, because this club was about to close, and these German bankers were going on to somewhere else, and he was trying to sort of like freeload a like entry into like another club after this one, and he started telling them that he'd created a piece of art for Saatchi and Saatchi back in the 90s. That was, it was a kind of triptych thing with like two scenes of Lemmy Riefenstahl's kind of movies, and the Baywatch in the middle panel of the triptych. And yeah, sorry.
Just made me think of something.
Well, they say that being an artist is a dangerous place to be because we mix with all different levels of society. And I think that's really true. It's easy for us to fit ourselves into wherever we need to be at the moment.
Well, I told you all that I met a Rothschild at an art festival here. That was a pretty bizarre experience.
Cool.
A real Rothschild, and he had a painting they had like this place, an arts festival here, and they selected like 100 paintings to put in this big palace to show them off. And there was this painting there, and sure enough, there was a guy there, and it said something like Andrew Rothschild. And there he was standing beside the painting, and I walked up to him and I said, "Are you like?" To my amazement, he was Irish. I thought he'd be English or something like that, but he was Irish. And I said, "Are you like, one of the Rothschilds, the famous banking family?" He goes, "Yeah, well, the Irish like end of the family." And I'm like, and I said, "You're a very, very good painter." And he was a really, really nice guy. He was not like an asshole or anything, not snobby or anything. He was really, really friend and an excellent painter.
Seems like if you were a Rothschild, you wouldn't really need to be snobby, right? Like, what's it gonna gain you?
That stereotype seems to be true. They seem to have branches of the family in every country.
Yes.
Who are among the establishment.
For sure.
But he was a really nice guy. I mean, I was kind of like, I think like a week before I'd been watching some David film presentation about how evil the Rothschilds were or something. And here I am talking to this young guy who's like really polite and really friendly and really a decent guy, So it was kind of like hard to reconcile the two,
I've heard it said before that, probably the majority of the elite are really just kind of bumbling through.
Yeah.
And there are just a few key individuals who are,
I know, I don't want to be held responsible for my family. Can I just be like looked at for who I am and let's leave them out of it? You know what I mean?
I often wonder too, how many of the elites are just the big pieces on the chessboard, and it's the real people who are the real shitbags, or the hands that move those pieces, so to speak. So it's
and
like,
are they even people?
Yeah, entities, right? Yeah, but I would imagine that some of these people, the Rothschilds and the whatevers, are just big just pieces. They're not even players on the game necessarily. Presidents, heads of state. Yeah.
The Romanovs proved that. I mean, look what the Romanovs were considered gods in Russia in the Tsarist days, and then they end up being all shot to death in a basement. I certainly wouldn't want to be part of royalty if that's the kind of, the ship goes down, we all go down together kind of thing.
I think I remember you saying, Thomas, that sometimes in royalty, somebody's born that's like so. I think you were talking about the Prussians, about how psychopathic they were, but then every now and then you get some people, their genetic bloodline born that are so the opposite. They're so empathic and they're so sensitive.
That was Frederick II of Prussia. When he was born, his father with his family were quite upset because all he wanted to do was make art and make music, and he had this relationship with this guy who was, looking back on it now, was gay, and he was very happy-go-lucky, and his father needed a general. He needed someone on the battlefield, and something happened where there was an attempt to overthrow Frederick I, and Frederick II was involved in it because his father was a bit of a tyrant. And so they arrested Frederick II, and of course his father's not going to charge his son with treason and execute his own son, because what kind of message does that send out? So he got this guy that he was his best friend or boyfriend or whatever, and had him charged with treason and forced him to watch the guy being beheaded. His boyfriend, he actually held his head open to the gates, the guillotine, and forced him to watch the beheading. And the reports were that Frederick was so distraught, he went into what you described like a psychedelic state, where he was screaming and howling inside his cell and talking all kinds of weird languages. And then when he came out of prison, he was a completely different Frederick. He was like his father, and he was cold and ruthless and calculating, and went on to form the Prussian Empire, as almost as if they did that to get an entity inside him or something.
The Hungarian.
You just said talking languages, and that's what chilled me when you said, God, yeah.
Yeah, I made a video about that, but I also watched a TV show about it that was filmed in Germany in the 70s. It was like a TV movie. The production values were quite poor, and it wasn't translated into English, and my German is okay, so, but I could follow it enough to see the point they were getting at, that what they had done to Frederick II was almost like a shock to the system to destroy his personality and bring in a new personality. And the father deliberately did this, and it worked.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, a state of dissociation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that like the purpose of ritual child abuse that the elite do to their
I think so. I think this was kind of in the same. I think that's why those like elitist schools in England and stuff, they get buggered when they're boys by the older boys and stuff like that. It's to damage them at some level, to wreck their humanity at some level. They go, like I don't know if you saw that movie If with Malcolm McDowell, Malcolm McDowell, about like the private schools in England, but the younger boys were raped by the older boys and stuff like that, and that was common. That's what was done to them, and it still goes on. And it's all about dissociation, destroying their brains, almost like a kind of an MK Ultra type thing, but among themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the Frederick II thing is remarkable because he also changed Germany as well. He changed Germany and Prussia into a different world, a different culture. It was like the whole society became possessed by whatever jumped into him. Very fascinating. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Thomas, can you talk to me about with your trip to Germany, and you went into the forest, and it really
the Wielisburg, the Odenwald. Yeah, the Odenwald. Yeah, the forest there is in southern Germany, and I wanted to make a film. It's in a place called Darmstadt. Well, it's actually in a place called Frankenstein, but it's a suburb of Darmstadt, which is a small city south of Frankfurt. The Odenwald, I wanted to go and make a film there because it's the Odin's Wood, Odenswald, and it's also like the paranormal and witchcraft center of Germany, more so even than the Harz Mountains. The Harz Mountains is Germanic paganism, so it's very Votanic and all that kind of thing. Southern Germany, it's more Celtic, so they have Samhain as a bigger deal, and so they have like things like the Fallschmier with these rocks where strange lights appear. And they've no megaliths, but everything goes wrong. Like compasses don't work, and it's a big thing for that. Like, and the god Odin is supposed to live there. So I wanted to go there and also visit the original Frankenstein's castle, where this guy called Dipple made this thing called Dipple's oil, which is like a kind of an alchemical cure using electricity. But they also, this is where Mary Shelley got the idea for using lightning and all this stuff to bring dead bodies, galvanism, back to life and all this kind of thing. And so I arrived there, and I was staying in Darmstadt. It's it's an interesting city. It's it's where all the hard end quantum stuff gets discovered in Germany. The university there is in the high end of CERN type things, and there's even an element called Darmstadtium, named after the city. And so I went out on the tram and to the mountains, and I said, "Fuck this! I'm going to spend the night here and hike here." So I found the camping shop, and I bought a sleeping bag and a small tent. And I said I always wanted to sleep in one of these Germanic forests anyway, just in the just to see what it's like. And I bought like flashlight, and I bought sandwiches and stuff like that. And I bought a knife with a blade about that length just in case, just to protect myself. And I spent the night in the woods, and it was amazing. It was unbelievable. I felt I was being followed, but not terribly frightened. But there were wolves moving in at that time, and I didn't know, but I thought it was a wild boar or something following me because it smelled the sandwiches. I don't know what it was, but I was followed for a huge amount over this hill in the dark. And then I kind of half-assed made the tent, tying it to trees, and then had a great night's sleep. Woke up the next morning, it was beautiful and everything. And then I went up to Frankenstein's castle and did the whole thing, hiked over the mountain, and then there was a village down at the bottom of the hill. It began with the letter M. I can't remember it, but I found a kind of a bed and breakfast there, and I just wanted a proper wash and a proper meal because I was being out in the rough. And I got talking to the lady who ran the thing, and she was saying, "You did not camp in the woods last night." And I said, "I did." And she says, "Are you mad? It's dangerous." She goes, nobody goes into the woods at night." And I said, "Well, I was there last night." And so I gave her kid all the camping equipment I had, because I couldn't bring it back. You can't bring that back to Ireland on the plane. So I gave him the big flashlight, and I gave him the knife and everything. He was delighted. But she brings her husband in, and she goes, "Guess what he did last night? He was camping out in the Odenwald in the woods." And the husband was like, "Fucking crazy."
On your own.
Fucking crazy. And he says, "Don't." He says, "So dangerous out there, and there's all kinds of weirdos in the woods and everything, like cults and stuff like that." But that's how nothing bad happened to me. But that's what happened that night. And
did you have that knowledge then? You made the Blair Witch thing about the woods eating, not eating the.
Well,
yeah, mind.
No, it was more of a case of that people told me there were cults in the woods. But I said, well, they're just pagans. They're not like, Blair, I don't know, hillbilly killing cults or something like that. So, but it turns out there was those kind of cults in the woods. There was also wolves the woods were full of wolves, and that was not, it made it dangerous too, which I was stupid in many ways, but it was kind of an adventure also. But no, my biggest fear, but honest to God, everything went bonkers. Now that's in a different part of Germany. That's north of Germany. That's the Liechtenstein. That's another story with that one. But yes, the electronic equipment went crazy. The compass went mental. You couldn't get a phone signal. You couldn't get nothing. When you went, I walked over to Falschmere, and I have an RF meter. I showed you the one I have, Jason, and it was crazy. Yeah, the place is definitely what you call and it's also it's part of the gigantic ancient forests of Europe that still exists. So it's never ever been knocked down and turned to farms and then gone back to forest again. It's the primal forest of Germany. But I mean, I have to say it was a beautiful experience. I loved every moment of it.
I suppose the pagan tribes will use the woods as against any armies to.
The Romans never conquered it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the Romans. That was like the Romans could never get into. It's in the southern state of Hesse. So the Romans could never get into it. So it's kind of like the extremes of the Roman Empire, and Christianity barely got into it too. There were stories, but that's where all the stories of the Grimm, the Brothers Grimm stories are all there. But there's also the story of the Wildenbicken, which is a wild woman. And I now think it's a Bigfoot thing, of a wild, hairy woman who lives in those woods. And the story was originally like that she had rejected Christianity and gone back to being a pagan and became like an animal. But now I've been reading a lot since I came back a few years since, anything I could find on it. And there's not a lot, but it more and more sounds like it's a Bigfoot kind of thing. I'm more convinced that the Wildenbicken is not so much a wild woman, but like a Bigfoot type cryptid type story. So yeah, it's got a lot, and there's also the giant worm that lives there, the lindworm, that consumes people, a gigantic worm, and the ghost of Rodenstein, the ghostly knight. Oh, it's just fantastic. I mean, if you're into legends and stuff like that, it's the best place to go. And yeah, I mean, I had a great time there. It was everything I wanted and more.
It's interesting you say, Thomas, the Bigfoot, you say it could be a type of fairy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that there's UFOs often seen around with Bigfoot. Yeah.
Well, myself, Jason, and Timothy are working on a Bigfoot film on and off. Well, I was supposed to go to America to do the final scenes for it, but because Joe Biden says I need needlecraft, I can't go now. But yeah, that's the conclusion we've come to. That it's.
I think there was anything that could make me hate him more.
That it's part of fairy folklore. It's a fairy.
Right, yep.
Yeah.
This is like serious fairy country around here, man.
What's that, Stephen?
Saying it's around this area here is like quite serious fairy country with lots of kind of stories here.
Oh, I bet.
There was a guy in the, I think he was born in 1643, and he studied theology and became a minister, and he was the Reverend Robert Kirk, but he was said to have the second sight, by his mother, and he claimed to be able to see the fairy realm, and he also wrote quite an extensive book. It was published in, I think, 1670 odds, and I think it's something. The title is something like The Hidden Commonwealth of Fairies and Fauns.
Right. Is his name? I think I know the guy.
Yeah. Robert Kirk.
Yeah.
Yeah, you heard it.
Yeah. That you're in the kind of the epicenter for all that stuff there.
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
Isn't Biddy Early's the same deal, right? Is she in County Clare? Her cottage is still there.
Is the witch, Timothy?
Biddy Early.
I can't hear you. What?
It's Biddy Early, Biddy Early. Her cottage over there in County Clare. She was one of the ones too. She had the
Biddy Early, yeah. I don't know much about her. Yeah, but there was loads of those witches, but those types, but they didn't. They didn't seek publicity. She's just famous because she kind of got famous.
Right.
That was common everywhere. That was common, and still is. They still exist. A lot of the older women there, but those kinds of like witches do still exist in Ireland. A lot. Good. Even around here where I live, they will ask. Certain people will have a cure, meaning that like if I have a rash, instead of going to the doctor, they'll say, "Do you know someone who has the cure?" And they'll say, "Oh, there's an old lady up in the mountains there who makes a tea or makes something like that or an ointment, and that'll take care of that rash." It's like a friend here who worked in a restaurant in town and spilled a bowl as a waitress and dropped a bowl of soup, a pot of soup on her, and she had a scab that no cream or ointment or any cortisone, nothing would fix it. And then somebody told that as a young lad nearby, excuse me, has the cure for that, for a rash and a burn. And what he does is he licks his hand and rubs it on your leg, and you get better. And he licked his hand, rubbed it on her leg, and said she was instantly cured. The rash went away. And then, and she says, "How did you learn this?" He was cutting turf in the bog one day. When you hear this one, and he saw a lizard, and the lizard was in, and he was looking at the lizard, And he said the lizard put a voice into his head and said, if you lick people who have burns, you'll cure them. And that's like, he's just a regular young guy. He's not like, he doesn't portray himself as a healer or a mystic. He's just a regular, he goes to the pub with his friends and everything. So you still get that. You still get that in Ireland, this whole thing of who has a cure, and it's usually some kind of fairy thing.
It's like the curanderos in Mexico, right? Similar to them.
What's that?
It's like the curanderos in Mexico, right? They're shamanistic, but they have a cure for something. I think linguistically there's a similar thing there with that word curandero.
Well, you had a thing in Ireland called fairy doctors who used to cure mental illness, and the medical profession destroyed them. And what happened was, in Ireland after the famine, there was lots of people who were left alone, and all their friends either died or left, and they suffered from terrible psychiatric problems, mostly young men. And they used to all do the same thing. They would lift the flagstones up at the bottom of their cottage and try and bury themselves alive. And people would have to, if there was a young man living alone, people would have to check on him constantly to make sure that they weren't digging the flagstones up from the bottom of the cottage, because they try to bury themselves alive because they're suffering from extreme depression. And there were these fellows called fairy doctors who went around. And what they used to do was they would make them dance for 24 hours, non-stop. They would come along and they'd bring a musician along, a fiddle player, and they'd take the young guy who was suffering from the depression, and they would make him dance for 24 hours while they chanted and shouted. And after 24 hours, the depression was cured, because there'd be a chemical change in their body or whatever, and whatever fixed them. They were ruthlessly hunted down by the medical profession and portrayed as frauds. And even though most of them never took money, all they would ask for would be a room for the night and dinner. And they were portrayed as frauds and gangsters and stuff. And at the same time, they built these enormous psychiatric hospitals around the country that are like, have to be seen to be believed. They're like something out of a Hammer horror film, where thousands of people suffering from mental illness would be put in there. And they would do things like throw cold water on them or drug them or all kinds of things, pure evil. And these places, they're all closed down now. The last of them probably closed in the 60s, but the buildings are all still around, and they're just gothic horror temples. The last place you'd want to be when you're suffering from mental illness is a place that looks like Dracula's castle. That's what they look like. Victorian horror architecture,
Well, what's so weird too is, like, throughout history, they've always demonized the people that are helping people that have no actual financial interest in it. They're just helping to help. While the ones that are like the vampires wanting to suck all the energy, selling help, it's so bizarre that people go along with that.
Yeah, it's like only recently, like people having lobotomies. It's almost like these so-called surgeons were the old torturers, the old in the dungeons. They had this, I think they had that same kind of mentality to their subject. And then maybe when they figured out maybe the kind of medications that would achieve the same thing without actually cutting somebody, that's where we got all the modern medicine, maybe,
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, a lot of the medicine was free too. It was plants and things like that you could pick around you, and that was no good if you were selling snake oil, and then all I have to do is make the plants illegal and make the snake oil legal, and you have the pharmaceutical industry.
That's what's happening right now, especially with magic mushrooms. It's now going to be the savior once it's been through the system and they've taken all the bits out of it, and then they can make money from it. But anybody who knows anything about mushrooms knows you can go out to a field, you can make tea with them, you can cure depression. We'll have some of that.
It's also this push of having a lawn. When you have just a garden and you let it let it get wild, you have all sorts of plants that are called weeds, but are actually medicinal. You don't have those anymore.
A weed's just something that grows where somebody doesn't want it to grow.
Yeah, funny you say that. I went to the beach today and I got this is dried chamomile. And when it grows at the beach and the cold, the beachy wind, it preserves the oil in it, the whatever it is, the lotion.
Yeah.
if you wash yourself and then rub yourself down with this, you'll have lovely soft skin that won't get any things. And right now, I'm holding it right now, and if I can actually feel the oil coming out of it, the chamomile oil, like literally coming out of it. Now this grows, by the beach in the sand dunes, millions of them. They're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
There's your skin thing, for free. And like I'm holding this now, I can feel like I squeeze oil out of it. It has that, it's rubbery, it has a rubbery texture because it's full of liquid. But there's an example. Just you said that, and funny you said that, Jay. A chap I work with yesterday said to me that his sister suffers from depression and she wants to try magic mushrooms. I said, where do you get them? And I said, they're in the fucking field over there. Just follow the sheep.
Just look for the cow shit.
I said, look for a slope where it's damp, a gentle slope where it's damp, and the sheep or cows around. Mostly sheep are better. And
fairy rings.
And fairy rings. Yes, and it's a very distinctive mushroom, the Liberty Cap little point on it. But you can't. So he picked them and he asked me, and he got them all ready, 4 or 5 of them. And I said, dry them out and have them gently. Don't go mad on them. Just have them make a tea from them or put soup or you just eat them with toast or fine. And but it's funny. He only knows about that because he read an article online by some pharmaceutical thing saying magic mushrooms cure depression. It's only because mainstream he found out about it.
For years and years. I mean, my parents used to say to me, oh, you'll poison yourself. And I'm thinking, well, no. If you know what you're doing, you make a cup of tea with it. It resets your brain, and that's the whole consciousness thing, isn't it? You're changing your consciousness by opening it up to nature. Nature is the best healer.
Yeah, and I was very suspicious by the whole mushroom thing, why they're suddenly getting so nice on that. They've already found some synthesized way to put it in a pill or something.
That's exactly what they're going to do with it. Then they can make money from it.
Well, and I think too that maybe they need us to be anesthetized. And if we anesthetize ourselves, it makes it that much easier for them to do, to add more pressure.
True. But that's true what Tino says. If you let the yard grow wild, all this medicine grows up all out of it.
Yep, it's wonderful.
That's why they had everybody have lawns.
I spray this shit with all kinds of chemicals.
I now have meadows. I have a front meadow and a back meadow. And by changing the language, I no longer have to mow. But my neighbors can't see my place. So it does look like I live in a witch's house in a meadow.
Good.
Yesterday, I had my friend over for tea. We get together on Saturday mornings, and there was a 3-point buck and his girls in my meadow. It was so fun.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Meadows is great.
Well, it justifies that it's not a lawn.
See, I've got the sea behind me, and I often go out and pick roses. There's dog roses all the way down, and I dry out enough to last me to make tea, to make bath tea bags and things, because it's for skin. You can't get anything better than rose petals.
Yeah, rose water is very good for makeup removal or just as a tonic, really.
Yeah,
very refreshing also.
And it's lovely in desserts. The way Middle Eastern people put roses in desserts. It's beautiful. And don't forget, rose hips are the highest source of vitamin C in nature.
Oh, we've got thousands of them on the bushes at the moment.
Yeah, and there's more vitamin C in a rose hip than there is in 20 oranges.
Oh.
During World War II, because they couldn't get oranges into Ireland, the schools used to send Irish school children out into the countryside to pick rose hips for that they could process into vitamin C, because they weren't able to import oranges because of the war. But it just goes to show you there was a better source of vitamin C at home growing all around them. Listen, guys, I gotta go now. I've got work in the morning, so I gotta go do a few things. It was brilliant talking to you, and thanks, Jason and Timothy, for setting it up again. And I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thomas, nice to meet you.
Bye.
I'm
Cheers.
gonna
Bye.
dive out.
Bye.
I also work in the morning. and
Yeah,
I'm
me
going to
too.
get to bed.
Thank
I
you,
have
guys.
Hi guys.
small children to run
See you
down
later.
the lane with to take to school.
I'm suspended at the moment from work. I put my arm around a colleague and they complained. And
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
since May, and I'm still trying to get compensation, but I'm going to look for another job anyway. But I'm still waiting.
Man, that's
Contacted
crazy.
citizens advice, blah blah. Getting a bit personal, but ridiculous.
Yeah, that's stupid.
Well, thank you everyone for coming out today. We'll do this again, not next weekend, but the following weekend. Y'all just send me a DM again. I'll shoot out the link like we did this time. And
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Jason.
Really
Thank you, Jason.
had a good time.
all
Very
right.
nice to meet you
Yeah,
guys.
thanks, everyone.
Good night. Have a nice night.
Bye.
Sweet dreams.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
All right.
Okay, guys.